What happens when a man saves you from a monster, but turns out he's the more dangerous monster himself? I'm Rowan Vale. 3 months ago, I was on the run from my killer. Tonight, I just found myself running straight into the territory of a crime boss. Follow my story to the end, about love, violence, and the fine line between protection and possession. If you enjoy it, hit like and comment where you're starting from, so I know how far this story has come. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The rain hit Chicago like a punishment that night. Not the soft kind that whispered against windows, but the vicious type that hammered pavement and turned gutters into rushing rivers of trash and lost things. Rowan Vale stood under a broken awning 3 blocks from the bus station, water dripping from her dyed auburn hair, a color she still wasn't used to seeing in mirrors, and stared at the crumpled address in her shaking hand. The ink was bleeding. Of course it was. She'd written it down 2 days ago in the public library bathroom, copying it from a Craigslist ad that seemed too good to be real. Server position. Nights, cash tips. No experience necessary. Discretion required. The last part should have warned her off, but discretion was exactly what she needed. Discretion meant no background checks. No references. No questions about the life she'd left behind in Ohio 3 months ago when she'd walked out of her apartment with nothing but a backpack and the clothes that didn't smell like his cologne. The bruise under her left eye had faded to a yellow-green smudge. She'd covered it with drugstore concealer that morning, her hand shaking so badly she'd had to start over twice. The girl in the mirror didn't look like Rowan anymore. That was the point. She checked her phone, the burner she'd bought at a gas station in Indiana, 8:47 p.m. The interview was at 9. The address led to a part of Chicago she didn't know, tucked into a neighborhood where old money met new danger. The kind of place where warehouses got converted into art galleries and everyone pretended not to notice the black sedans with tinted windows parked on every corner. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, a sleeve of crackers stolen from a convenience store when the clerk wasn't looking. The cash she'd saved from waitressing in Cleveland was almost gone. $73 left. Enough for maybe another week in the roach-infested hostel where she'd been sleeping with her shoes on and a knife under her pillow. "You should go back," a voice whispered in her head. "This is stupid. This is how girls disappear." But going back meant dying slowly. Meant showing up at homeless shelters where they'd ask for her real name. Meant using her social security number, leaving a trail Grant could follow straight to whatever gutter she'd crawled into. He'd made promises the last time. Promises about what he'd do if she ever tried to leave again. The scar on her ribs proved he wasn't the type to make empty threats. So Rowan pushed off from the wall and walked into the rain. The streets grew quieter as she moved deeper into the neighborhood. Old brick buildings rose on either side, their windows dark except for the occasional flicker of expensive lighting. She passed a restaurant with a line of people waiting under umbrellas, all of them dressed like they'd never worried about $73 in their lives. A woman laughed, the sound cutting through the rain, and Rowan felt something ugly twist in her chest. The address led her to a building with no sign, just a black door set into dark brick, a single light above it casting everything in harsh shadow. She stood there getting soaked, wondering if she'd copied the number wrong, when the door opened. A man stepped out, tall, built like he spent his life in a gym or a cage fight. He wore a suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing Rowan had ever owned combined. His eyes swept over her, taking in her soaked jeans, the ratty jacket, the careful way she held herself like someone used to making herself small. "You, Rowan?" His voice was flat, professional. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "You're early. Wait here." The door closed. Rowan stood in the rain for another 5 minutes, water running down her back, before it opened again. This time a woman appeared, older, sharp-eyed, wearing all black with her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Inside," the woman said, not unkind but not friendly either. "Wipe your feet." The interior was nothing like Rowan expected. She'd imagined a normal restaurant, bright lights, the smell of kitchen grease, maybe a manager's office with paperwork and a tired desk. Instead, she walked into what looked like the entrance to a different world. Dark walls. Soft lighting that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Music thrummed beneath the floor, low and steady like a heartbeat. The air smelled expensive, leather and something else she couldn't name. Something that made the hair on her arms stand up. "Coat," the woman said, holding out her hand. Rowan hesitated, then shrugged off her wet jacket. It left her in a black shirt she'd bought at Goodwill, the fabric thin enough that she knew her bra showed through. She crossed her arms over her chest. The woman's eyes softened a fraction. This way. They walked down a hallway lined with doors. All closed, all silent. Rowan's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. She caught her reflection in a mirror as they passed and barely recognized herself. Auburn hair plastered to her skull, makeup running, eyes too wide, too scared. Stop it, she told herself. You've been scared before. You're still breathing. The hallway opened into a larger space that stole the breath from Rowan's lungs. It was a club, but not like any she'd seen before. Velvet booths curved along the walls, each one half hidden in shadow. The bar stretched the length of the room, backlit so every bottle glowed like colored glass. The music was louder here, but still controlled, more felt than heard. And the people, everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Women in dresses that probably cost more than a month's rent. Men in suits that fit like they were born wearing them. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to look over their shoulders. Rowan's throat went dry. Up, the woman said, gesturing to a staircase at the far end. He's waiting. Who? Rowan started, but the woman was already walking away. She climbed. Her legs felt shaky, weak from hunger and fear, and the growing certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake. The staircase spiraled upward, opening onto a quieter floor where the music faded to a whisper. More doors. More silence. At the end of the hall, light spilled from an open doorway. Rowan made herself move toward it. The office was all glass and dark wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Chicago spread out below like scattered diamonds, rain streaking the glass in constant motion. A desk sat near the windows, expensive, modern, clear of everything except a single laptop and a glass of something amber. And behind the desk, a man who made Rowan forget how to breathe. He didn't look up right away. He was reading something on the laptop screen, his face lit by the cold glow. Sharp features. The kind that looked carved rather than born. Dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged in an art gallery, all angles and shadows. When he finally lifted his eyes, Rowan felt the impact like a physical thing. Gray. His eyes were the color of smoke and steel, and they pinned her in place like an insect on a board. Sit, he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to make you obey. Rowan sat. The chair was leather, expensive, and she felt like she was leaving a wet stain that would cost more to clean than she'd ever owned. The man closed the laptop and stood. He was tall, taller than Grant, though she hated that her brain went there first. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, and moved with the kind of easy control that suggested violence was always an option, but rarely necessary. He walked around the desk and leaned against it, studying her. Rowan kept her eyes down. It was safer that way. Look down, make yourself small, don't give him a reason. Look at me. Her head snapped up before she could stop herself. Those gray eyes tracked across her face slowly, methodically. She felt him cataloging every detail, the cheap makeup, the badly dyed hair, the fading bruise she'd tried so hard to hide. When his gaze lingered on her left cheekbone, Rowan's stomach dropped. What happened? He asked. Nothing. Try again. I fell. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not quite anger, colder than that. Who hits a woman and lets her walk around with the evidence on her face? Rowan's jaw tightened. I said I fell. And I said try again. The silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Rowan's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd come here desperate, willing to take any job that would keep her hidden and fed. But sitting here under this man's steady gaze, she realized she'd walked into something far more complicated than a simple interview. Does it matter? She finally said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. You put an ad online for a server. I need work. That's all that matters. He studied her for another long moment, then pushed off the desk and moved to the windows. Rain hammered the glass, turning the city lights into smears of color. What's your real name? Rowan Vale. Your real name. Her throat closed. That is my real name. No, he said quietly, still looking out at the city. That's the name on the fake ID you bought in Cleveland 2 months ago. Decent work, actually. Better than most of the trash people try to pass off. But I can spot a runner when I see one. Rowan's blood turned to ice. She stood, legs shaking, hand already reaching for her jacket before remembering she'd left it downstairs. I should go. Sit down. I made a mistake. Sit. The word cracked through the air like a whip. Rowan sat. Not because she wanted to, because every instinct she'd developed over the last 3 months told her that running right now would be worse than staying. The man turned from the window. In the better light, she could see details she'd missed before. The thin scar above his left eyebrow, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking. He looked to be in his early 30s, but his eyes seemed older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I'm going to make this simple, he said. You need work. I need someone I can trust to keep their mouth shut and not steal from me. Those are rare qualities, especially in someone desperate enough to answer an ad like mine. I'm not desperate, Rowan lied. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're soaking wet. You haven't eaten in at least 2 days, and you flinched when I raised my voice. You're desperate. The question is whether you're useful. Shame burned in Rowan's chest, hot and acidic. What kind of club is this? The kind where people come to forget their lives for a while. We serve drinks, we provide entertainment, and we make sure everyone leaves here exactly as they arrived. No safer, no more damaged. He moved closer, and Rowan had to force herself not to lean back. I don't care about your real name. I don't care why you're running or what you left behind. But I need to know if the person you're running from is going to show up here looking for you. The question hung in the air between them. No, Rowan said quietly. He doesn't know I'm in Chicago. You sure? She thought of the burner phone, the cash-only transactions, the way she'd avoided cameras and crowds for 3 months straight. I'm sure. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. You start tomorrow, 8 p.m. Wear black, shirt, pants, comfortable shoes. Hair tied back. No jewelry. You'll work the main floor serving drinks. You keep your eyes down, your mouth shut, and your hands to yourself. Tips are yours. You take home cash every night. No checks, no direct deposit, no paper trail. Rowan's heart was hammering. That's it? No more questions? I have all the answers I need. He moved back to his desk, already dismissing her. Nina will give you the details on your way out. Don't be late. She stood on shaking legs, making it halfway to the door before his voice stopped her. One more thing. She turned. Those gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Whatever you're running from, whoever put that bruise on your face, he doesn't exist in here. Inside these walls, you're under my protection. But the second you walk out that door, you're on your own. Understand? Rowan nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Good. I'll see you tomorrow, Rowan Vale. He said her fake name like he knew it was a costume she wore, but didn't care enough to pull it off. My name is Lucien Vere. Welcome to Obsidian. Rowan walked back through the rain in a daze. The address Nina had given her was for a staff entrance around back, less visible, easier to slip in and out without drawing attention. Tips averaged $200 to $300 a night, sometimes more, all cash. The work was straightforward. Serve drinks, smile when necessary, disappear when not needed. It should have felt like a miracle. Instead, it felt like a trap she couldn't see the edges of yet. She made it back to the hostel after midnight, her clothes still damp, her mind spinning. The room she shared with 3 other women was dark except for the streetlight bleeding through the thin curtain. Someone was snoring. Someone else muttered in their sleep. Rowan lay on her bunk fully clothed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and tried to figure out what she'd just walked into. Lucien Vere. Even his name sounded dangerous. She'd felt the weight of his attention like a hand on her throat. Not choking, not yet, but present. Aware. The way he'd looked at her bruise had triggered something she didn't want to examine too closely. Not anger, not pity. Something calculating. Like he'd seen violence done to her and filed it away under information that might be useful later. Inside these walls, you're under my protection. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made her skin crawl. Protection from one dangerous man because another dangerous man said so. Was that better? Or just different? But $300 a night, cash. No questions. No trail. Rowan closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she'd walk into Obsidian as an employee instead of a desperate girl begging for scraps. Tomorrow she'd start building a life that didn't involve looking over her shoulder every 5 minutes. Tomorrow she'd figure out why the way Lucien Weyer looked at her made her feel more exposed than any bruise ever had. She showed up at 7:45 p.m. the next night, dressed in black like he'd instructed. The staff entrance was a plain metal door with a keypad lock. Nina buzzed her in without a word, leading her through narrow hallways that smelled like industrial cleaner and old smoke. The behind-the-scenes of Obsidian was nothing like the front. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, harsh fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. Lockers are here, Nina said, gesturing to a room lined with metal lockers. Keep your phone and personal items locked up. No exceptions. You get caught with a phone on the floor, you're done. Rowan nodded, storing her backpack in an empty locker and pocketing the key. Training's quick, Nina continued, already walking. Marcus will show you the basics, but it's not complicated. Customers order. You bring drinks. You collect tips. Keep the glasses flowing and the tables clear. Don't sit unless you're on break. Don't talk to customers unless they talk to you first. And most importantly, she stopped, turning to face Rowan with an expression that held zero warmth. Don't ask questions about the clientele. Not who they are, not what they do, not why they're here. You see nothing, you hear nothing, you remember nothing. Clear? Clear. Nina's eyes narrowed, studying Rowan's face with the same clinical assessment Lucien had used. He told me to put you on the main floor. That's unusual for a first night. Usually new girls start in the private rooms where the tips are smaller but the mistakes matter less. She leaned in slightly. So either he sees something in you or he's testing you. Either way, don't fuck it up. Training took 30 minutes. Marcus, the man who'd opened the door last night, walked her through the drink menu, the table layout, the signal system for when customers needed attention. He showed her where the glasses were kept, how to carry a tray without spilling, the fastest route between the bar and each section. Keep moving, he said. Sharks can smell hesitation, and don't take shit from anyone. They try something, you walk away and find me or Nina. We handle it. What kind of something? Rowan asked. Marcus gave her a look that said the question answered itself. The kind that earns them a permanent ban and a broken hand. Mr. Weyer doesn't tolerate that bullshit. At exactly 8 p.m., the doors opened. The main floor transformed. Music swelled, something with a bass line that vibrated in Rowan's chest. Light shifted from harsh clarity to amber shadow. The space that had seemed elegant but empty last night now filled with bodies and voices. The air thickening with expensive perfume and cigarette smoke that shouldn't have been legal indoors but somehow was. Rowan picked up her tray and dove in. The first hour passed in a blur of orders and cash. Customers were surprisingly polite, or at least transactional. They ordered drinks with the kind of casual confidence that came from never being told no, then tipped with crumpled bills they didn't bother counting. 20 here, 50 there. Once, a woman in a dress that probably cost more than Rowan's entire childhood handed her a $100 bill and told her to keep the change from a single martini. By 10 p.m., Rowan's feet ached and her lower back screamed, but her pockets were heavy with cash. She'd made close to $400 already, and the night was barely half over. She was refilling drinks at a booth near the back when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. She glanced up, scanning the room, and found him. Lucien stood on the second-floor balcony, leaning against the railing with a drink in his hand. He wasn't looking at the crowd below. He was looking at her. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his attention, gray eyes tracking her movements with the same clinical focus from last night. Rowan looked away quickly, her heart hammering for reasons she didn't want to examine. She delivered the drinks, collected her tip, and moved to the next table. But she could still feel him watching. All night, whenever she glanced up, he was there. Sometimes talking to someone, always men in expensive suits who seemed nervous in his presence. Sometimes alone, but always watching. It should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt like standing too close to a fire, dangerous, but warm in a way she'd almost forgotten existed. At midnight, Nina tapped her shoulder. Break. 15 minutes. UN Lounge is through that door. Rowan fled to the employee lounge like something was chasing her. The room was small and depressing, a couch with worn cushions, a vending machine that hummed ominously, a coffee maker crusted with old grounds. She collapsed onto the couch and counted the cash in her pockets with shaking hands. $640. One night, more than she'd made in 2 weeks waitressing in Cleveland. The door opened. Rowan shoved the money back in her pockets, looking up. Lucien stepped inside. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, blocking the only exit, that same unreadable expression on his face. "How's your first night?" he asked. "Fine." Rowan's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You're fast, efficient. The customers like you. Is that a problem?" His mouth curved slightly. "No, but it's interesting. Most people who come here desperate and scared spend their first night fumbling. You're moving like you've done this before." "I've waitressed. Not like this you haven't." He pushed off the door, moving closer. Rowan forced herself not to lean back. "Where'd you work before Cleveland?" "Why does it matter?" "Because I'm curious." He sat on the arm of the couch, close enough that she could smell whatever expensive cologne he wore. Something clean and dark that made her want to lean in even though every survival instinct screamed at her to run. "You're educated. I can hear it in the way you talk. But you're working a job that requires no background check in a club most people don't even know exists. That's a story. Not one I'm telling. Fair enough." He studied her face again, and Rowan braced for him to ask about the bruise again. Instead, he said, "You cold?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "You're shivering. Could be nerves, could be cold. The AC is aggressive down here." Rowan hadn't noticed, but now that he mentioned it, goosebumps covered her arms. The thin black shirt she wore was meant for summer, not climate-controlled winter. "I'm fine." Lucien made a sound that might have been amusement. He stood and shrugged off the jacket he wore, some dark, expensive thing, and held it out. She stared at it like it might bite her. "I don't need—" "Take it." Not a request. Rowan took the jacket. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like him, that same clean, dangerous scent. She pulled it on and immediately felt less exposed, even though it was several sizes too big. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Good." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "That bruise on your face. It's fading, but it'll take another few weeks to disappear completely. If you need makeup that actually covers it, tell Nina. She'll get you something that works." Rowan's throat tightened. "Why do you care?" Lucien looked at her over his shoulder, and for a moment something flickered in those gray eyes. Something almost human. "Because no one should have to walk around wearing evidence of someone else's violence." Then he was gone. Rowan sat alone in the employee lounge wearing a jacket that probably cost more than her rent, her hands shaking, her mind spinning. She'd come here looking for anonymity, for a job that would let her disappear into the background while she figured out how to build a life from the wreckage Grant had left behind. Instead, she'd found a man who saw through every lie she told herself and still offered her warmth when she was cold. That should have terrified her more than anything Grant ever did. The thing was, it did. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Rowan hadn't expected to find comforting. She'd show up at 7:45, change into black, and step onto the main floor as someone else. Someone competent, efficient, invisible. The customers blurred together after a while. Lawyers celebrating wins, businessmen hiding from wives. Women in groups drinking champagne and pretending they didn't notice the men watching them. Everyone came to Obsidian to be someone else for a few hours, and Rowan fit right in. The money piled up. 2 weeks in, she moved out of the hostel and into a tiny studio apartment in a building that smelled like old cooking grease but had a lock that actually worked. She bought real groceries instead of stealing crackers. Started sleeping more than 4 hours a night. The constant clench of fear in her chest loosened just enough that she could breathe without counting. And every night Lucien watched her from that second-floor balcony. He rarely came down to the main floor during operating hours. His territory was upstairs, the private rooms where deals got made and secrets got traded. But when he did appear, the entire club shifted. People moved differently around him, like he was gravity, and they were caught in his orbit. He never raised his voice, never had to. Men twice his size treated him with the kind of deference usually reserved for loaded guns. Rowan tried not to think about what that meant. She tried not to notice the way his eyes tracked her through the crowd, or the fact that certain customers, the ones who got too handsy, too drunk, too aggressive, mysteriously ended up escorted out by Marcus before they could cause real trouble. She tried not to wonder who Lucien Vare actually was beneath the expensive clothes and careful control. She tried. She failed. It was her third Friday when everything shifted. The night started normal, busy but manageable. Rowan worked her section, collecting tips and avoiding eye contact. Around 11 p.m., a group of men settled into a booth near the back. They were loud from the start, already drunk when they arrived, throwing money around like it was weightless. Rowan brought their first round, top-shelf whiskey, neat, and felt the leader's eyes crawl over her like bugs on skin. "What's your name, sweetheart?" He was mid-40s, expensive suit, wedding ring that caught the light when he gestured. "Rowan." "Pretty name. You knew?" 3 weeks. He grinned, showing teeth that were too white to be real. "Then let me educate you about how things work here. We tip very well for very good service." The emphasis on very made her skin crawl. Rowan set down the drinks and stepped back. "Enjoy." His hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to make a point. "Don't rush off. Sit down. Have a drink with us." Every muscle in Rowan's body locked. The grip on her wrist triggered something visceral. Grant's hand around her throat, his voice in her ear, the feeling of being trapped with nowhere to run. She yanked her arm back hard enough that the man's drink sloshed. "Don't touch me." The booth went quiet. The man's smile faded into something uglier. "I'm just being friendly." "I'm working." "Then work." He grabbed her wrist again, harder this time, pulling her closer. "Sit. Down." Rowan drove her knee up and caught him in the stomach. Not hard enough to do real damage, she'd learned that lesson, but enough to make him let go. She stumbled back, tray clattering to the floor, every eye in the section now turned their direction. The man surged to his feet, fury twisting his face into something animal. "You fucking—" A hand landed on his shoulder. Everyone froze. Lucien stood behind the man, dressed in all black, his expression carved from ice. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The pressure of his hand on the man's shoulder made the threat crystalline clear. "Mr. Vare," the man stammered, sobering fast. "I was just— Leave." Lucien's voice was quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "It was a misunderstanding. Now." The man and his group scrambled out of the booth and disappeared toward the exit like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The music swelled to fill the silence they left behind. Rowan stood there, heart hammering, Lucien's jacket, the one she hadn't returned yet, suddenly feeling heavy on her shoulders. Lucien turned to her. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Good." He glanced at Marcus, who'd materialized from somewhere. "Get her off the floor. 15-minute break." "I'm fine," Rowan protested. "I can keep working." "Break. Now." He looked at her then, really looked, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression shift into something almost concerned. 15 minutes. Then you can come back if you want." He walked away before she could argue. Rowan spent her break in the employee lounge with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she couldn't drink. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and cold despite the jacket. She kept seeing Grant's face instead of that customer's, kept feeling hands that weren't there anymore. The door opened. Lucien stepped inside carrying 2 glasses of something amber. "I'm fine," Rowan said automatically. "I know." He handed her one of the glasses. "Drink it anyway." She took it because arguing seemed exhausting. The liquor burned going down, good whiskey, the kind she couldn't afford. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You didn't. He did." Lucien sat on the couch next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You reacted appropriately to being grabbed by a drunk asshole. No apology necessary. He was a customer. He was a problem. Problems get removed." He studied her profile. "This the first time someone's grabbed you like that?" The question was carefully neutral, but Rowan heard what he wasn't asking. "Here?" "Yes." "I meant anywhere." She took another drink, letting the burn fill the silence. "No." Lucien's jaw tightened. "The person who gave you that bruise, they put their hands on you like that?" "Among other things." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Rowan glanced over and found Lucien staring at his glass, his knuckles white where he gripped it. When he spoke, His voice was carefully, dangerously controlled. They do it often? Often enough. She didn't know why she was answering. Maybe the whiskey, maybe the exhaustion. Maybe because sitting here with someone who'd just thrown out a customer for touching her made something tight in her chest finally loosen. He had rules. I broke them sometimes. He didn't like that. So he hit you. Yes. And you stayed. Until I didn't. Rowan drained the rest of her glass. 3 months ago, I packed a bag and walked out while he was at work. Haven't looked back. He looking for you? The question made ice flood her veins. I don't know, probably, but he doesn't know where I am. You sure? I'm careful. No social media, no contact with anyone from before, cash only, new phone, new name, new everything. She laughed, but it came out bitter. Turns out it's pretty easy to disappear when no one's actually looking that hard. Lucien set his glass down and turned to face her fully. In the harsh fluorescent light, she could see details she'd missed before. The faint scar above his eyebrow, the shadows under his eyes that suggested sleep didn't come easy. If he finds you, he said quietly, if he shows up here or anywhere near you, I want you to tell me immediately. Why? Because I meant what I said. Inside these walls, you're under my protection. Rowan's throat tightened. I don't need protection. I need a job. You have both. He stood, picking up the empty glasses. At the door, he paused. The jacket. You can keep it. You're still wearing it every shift anyway. Heat flooded her face. She'd meant to return it after that first night, but it had become a kind of armor, one more layer between her and the world. I'll wash it. Keep it, he repeated, then added, so quietly she almost missed it. It looks better on you anyway. He left before she could form a response. Rowan sat alone in the employee lounge wearing Lucien Veyer's jacket and tried to figure out why his protection felt more dangerous than any threat Grant had ever made. The thing about Lucien that Rowan couldn't figure out was this. He was nothing like Grant. Grant yelled, broke things, used his fists when words weren't enough. Lucien never raised his voice, never touched her without permission, treated her like she was something valuable but breakable, a contradiction that made her head spin. But he was still dangerous, maybe more dangerous because the threat was wrapped in soft words and careful distance. She caught pieces of his world in fragments. The men who met him in the private rooms upstairs all carried themselves with the same predatory confidence. Money changed hands. Conversations happened in low voices behind closed doors. Once, she saw Marcus escort someone out through the back, a man with blood on his face who didn't come back. She never asked. Nina's warning echoed in her head, see nothing, hear nothing, remember nothing. But Rowan wasn't blind. She'd escaped one kind of danger by running straight into another, and she was just smart enough to recognize the trap, even if she couldn't figure out how to avoid it. The 5th week, Lucien asked her to stay after closing. Just for a few minutes, he said, appearing at her section as the last customers filtered out. There's something I want to show you. Every instinct screamed at her to say no. Instead, she heard herself say, okay. The club transformed after hours. With the music off and the lights up, Obsidian looked less like a fantasy and more like what it was, a business built on illusions. Staff moved through the space collecting glasses, wiping tables, counting registers. Marcus nodded at her as she followed Lucien upstairs. The 2nd floor was quieter, more intimate. Private rooms branched off a central hallway, each one decorated differently, but all sharing the same expensive secret quality. Lucien led her to the end of the hall and unlocked a door she'd never seen anyone use. After you. Rowan stepped inside and stopped breathing. It wasn't an office. It was a penthouse apartment, all glass windows and dark wood and furniture that looked like it cost more than her life. The view stretched across Chicago, the city lights spreading out like a carpet of stars. Rain streaked the windows, turning everything soft and blurred. This is where you live? She asked. Sometimes. Lucien moved to a bar cart and poured 2 drinks without asking. When I don't want to go home. Where's home? Wherever feels safe. He handed her a glass and gestured to the windows. Come here. She went because refusing felt more dangerous than complying. They stood side by side, looking out at Chicago while the rain drummed against the glass. This close, she could feel the heat coming off his body, Smell that clean, dangerous scent that made her want to lean closer, even though she knew better. I brought you up here for a reason, Lucian said quietly. The past 5 weeks, you've been perfect. Too perfect. You show up early, work hard, keep your head down, and ask no questions. That's smart. But it's also exhausting. Rowan's hands tightened on her glass. I thought that's what you wanted. It is, but I also want you to understand something. He turned to face her, gray eyes reflecting the city lights. You're safe here, not just from drunk customers or bad tips, from whoever you ran from. This club, this building, everything inside these walls belongs to me, and what's mine, I protect. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it made something warm and dangerous curl in her stomach. Why? Because I recognize running when I see it, and because he stopped, jaw tightening like he was fighting with himself over what to say next. Because no one protected you before. Someone should have. They didn't. So I am. Rowan's throat closed. You don't even know me. I know enough. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his thumb along her cheekbone, right where the bruise had finally faded completely. I know someone hurt you badly enough that you left everything behind to escape. I know you're smarter than you pretend to be, tougher than you want anyone to see. I know you've been wearing my jacket for 5 weeks and sleeping with a knife under your pillow, even though the door on your new apartment actually locks. She jerked back. How do you know that? Because I made sure the building was safe before you moved in. Because I wanted to know if anyone had followed you to Chicago. Because protecting you means knowing where the threats are before they become problems. Horror washed through her, cold and sharp. You've been following me? Protecting you. The distinction seemed important to him. There's a difference. Not to me. Rowan set down her glass before she dropped it. You had no right. You're right. He said it so simply that it stopped her protest in her throat. I had no right. But I did it anyway because the alternative, you getting hurt because I wasn't paying attention, wasn't acceptable. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care what happens to me? Lucian looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he closed the distance between them in 2 steps, close enough that Rowan could count his heartbeat in the pulse at his throat. Because the first time you walked into my office, bruised and scared and trying so hard to pretend neither was true, I saw myself 10 years ago, he said quietly. And I couldn't... He stopped, jaw working. Ask me again in a month when you've seen more of who I actually am. But right now, the answer is I don't know. I just know I do. They stood there in the rain-washed darkness. The city sprawled below them, and Rowan felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She'd run from Grant because staying meant dying slowly. But standing here with Lucian Vare, a man who admitted to following her, to protecting her without permission, to making her safety his responsibility, felt like falling into a different kind of trap entirely. One she wasn't sure she wanted to escape. I should go, she whispered. You should. He didn't move. Neither did she. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibilities neither could voice. Then Lucian stepped back, putting safe distance between them again, and the spell broke. I'll have Marcus drive you home, he said, his voice carefully neutral again. It's late. Rowan nodded and fled before she could do something stupid like stay. She lay awake in her tiny apartment until dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out when exactly she'd stopped being terrified of Lucian Vare and started being terrified of what he made her feel instead. Outside, Chicago woke up slowly, car horns, sirens, the endless noise of a city that never really slept. Rowan pulled Lucian's jacket tighter around herself and wondered if she'd ever actually been running towards safety at all, or if she'd just traded one kind of cage for another that came with a better view. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a pressure cooker with the heat slowly rising. Rowan kept working her shifts, kept collecting cash, kept pretending the night in Lucian's penthouse hadn't changed everything. But it had. The air between them was different now, charged with something neither of them would name, but both felt every time their eyes met across the crowded club floor. He was still watching her. She was starting to watch back. It started small. Lucien would appear at the bar when she was picking up orders, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, but never actually touching. He'd ask how her night was going in that quiet, controlled voice that made her spine tingle. She'd answer with careful professionalism, pretending her heart wasn't hammering against her ribs. Then he'd leave and she'd spend the next hour hyper-aware of exactly where he was in the building. Nina noticed. Of course she did. The older woman had eyes like a hawk and an instinct for danger that probably came from decades of surviving in Lucien's world. "Careful," Nina said one night during a lull, loading glasses onto Rowan's tray. "He's not a man you play games with." "I'm not playing anything," Rowan protested. Nina's look said she wasn't buying it. Maybe not on purpose, but that doesn't matter. Lucien Vare doesn't do casual. He doesn't do normal. You get close to him, you get pulled into his world, and his world eats people alive. What world is that? The one where people disappear and nobody asks questions. Nina's voice was flat, matter of fact. "I've worked here 7 years. I've seen what happens when someone gets too close, asks too many questions, or tries to leave when he doesn't want them to. It never ends well." Ice flooded Rowan's veins. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning, from someone who actually gives a shit whether you survive this job." Nina turned back to the bar. "Keep your head down, take the money, and don't mistake protection for affection. He's not saving you, he's collecting you." The words haunted Rowan for days, because they confirmed every fear she'd been trying to ignore since that night overlooking the city. Lucien wasn't offering her safety. He was offering her a different kind of cage. Prettier, more comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. She should have run, should have packed her bag, taken the money she'd saved, and disappeared into a different city with a different fake name. Instead, she showed up for her next shift early and found herself looking for him in every shadow. The shift came during her 7th week at Obsidian. Rowan was working a private party in one of the upstairs rooms, a corporate event where men in suits drank expensive scotch and talked about quarterly earnings like they were describing war strategies. The tips were good, but the conversation was mind-numbing. She was refilling drinks when one of the men grabbed her arm. Not aggressive, just drunk and stupid. "Hey, sweetheart, what time do you get off?" Rowan extracted her arm with practiced ease. "I don't." "Come on, just one drink after." She said no. The voice came from the doorway, quiet and absolute. Everyone in the room turned. Lucien stood there in all black, his expression unreadable, but his presence filling the space like a physical threat. The man who'd grabbed Rowan went white. "Mr. Vare, I was just leaving." Lucien stepped aside, gesturing to the door. "All of you." The room emptied in under 30 seconds. Rowan stood there with her tray, watching expensive suits flee like rabbits from a wolf. When the last one disappeared, Lucien closed the door. The silence was deafening. "You didn't have to do that," Rowan said, hating how shaky her voice sounded. "I had it handled." "I know." He moved closer, and she tracked every step like prey watching a predator approach. "But I'm tired of watching men put their hands on you." "It was nothing. He was just drunk." "I don't care if he was sober as a priest. He touched you without permission." Lucien stopped a foot away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I told you, what's mine, I protect." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it made heat pool low in her stomach. "I'm not yours." "Aren't you?" He reached up slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her skin. "You're wearing my jacket, working in my club, living in an apartment I made sure was safe, sleeping better because I've had people making sure no one from your past shows up asking questions. Tell me how that doesn't make you mine." Rowan's breath caught. "That's not... You can't just..." "Can't what? Care whether you're safe? Want to know you're not going to disappear one night because some piece of shit tracked you down?" His jaw tightened. "You think I don't know what he did to you? The man you ran from? You don't know anything about him." "I know everything about him." Lucien's voice was still quiet, but something dangerous threaded through it now. "Grant Mercer, 34, sales manager at a medical supply company in Columbus. 2 priors for assault that got pleaded down. 1 ex-girlfriend who filed a restraining order and then mysteriously dropped it. And you, Rebecca Chen, though you stopped using that name 3 months ago when you walked out of the apartment you shared with him after he put you in the hospital." The room tilted. Rowan grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "How?" "Because the second you walked into my office looking like a ghost, I knew someone had hurt you badly enough to make you run. And I don't let threats to my people go uninvestigated. He stepped closer, and this time she did back up until the table pressed against her spine. So yes, Rebecca, I know who you were. I know what he did. And I know he's still in Columbus telling everyone who'll listen that his girlfriend had a breakdown and he's worried sick about her. Hearing her real name out loud after 3 months of burial felt like being slapped. Don't call me that. Why? Because it reminds you that you're not actually Rowan Vale, that you're running from a man who put you in the hospital and would do it again if he found you? Stop. The word came out choked. I can make him stop. Lucian's voice dropped even lower, intimate and deadly. One word from me and Grant Mercer disappears. Permanently. No more looking over your shoulder, no more nightmares, no more running. Horror washed through her cold and sharp. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about removing a problem. He's a person. He's a cancer. Lucien's eyes had gone cold, gray as winter ice. And cancer gets cut out before it spreads. Rowan shoved past him, putting distance between them before she suffocated. You're insane. I don't want him dead. I just want to be left alone. Then let me make sure you're left alone. By becoming a murderer? She laughed, but it came out broken. That's not protection. That's just different violence. There's nothing different about it. Lucian's voice hardened. Violence is violence. The only question is who controls it. Right now, Grant Mercer is walking around free while you're hiding under a fake name in a city you don't know. That's not justice. That's cowardice. The word hit like a fist. Rowan's vision went red. Fuck you. Truth hurts? You don't know anything about what I've survived? I know you're still surviving it. He closed the distance again, and this time there was nowhere to run. Every night you flinch when someone moves too fast. Every time a customer raises their voice, you look like you're calculating escape routes. You're not free, Rebecca. You're just hiding, and hiding isn't living. At least I'm alive. Her voice broke. At least I'm not the kind of person who solves problems by making people disappear. Something flickered in Lucien's eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. For a moment he looked almost human. Then the mask slammed back into place and he stepped away, putting cold distance between them again. You're right, he said quietly. You're not that kind of person, but I am, and that's why you're safe here. He walked out before she could form a response. Rowan stood alone in the empty private room with her heart hammering and her hands shaking and the terrible knowledge that everything Nina warned her about was true. Lucien Vere was dangerous, not in the loud, obvious way Grant had been, all fists and rage and broken dishes. Lucien's danger was quiet and absolute, the kind that wrapped around you like silk until you couldn't remember what breathing without it felt like. She should quit. Walk out tonight and never come back. Find another city, another name, another life. Instead, she picked up her tray and went back to work. The next 2 weeks were torture. Lucien didn't come near her, didn't watch from the balcony, didn't show up during her breaks with expensive whiskey and careful concern. It was like he'd erased himself from her existence, leaving only the ghost of his presence. The jacket she still wore, the apartment he'd vetted, the job that paid her in untraceable cash. Nina's words echoed constantly. He's not saving you, he's collecting you. But if that was true, why did his absence feel like punishment? Rowan threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts until she was pulling 12-hour days and collapsing into bed too exhausted to dream. The money piled up, $3,000, $5,000, enough to run again if she needed to, enough to disappear properly this time. She told herself that's what she'd do. Any day now, just one more shift, one more week, one more... The lie tasted bitter, even in her own head. It was a Tuesday night, slower than weekends but still steady, when Marcus found her at the bar. His expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes made her stomach drop. Mr. Vere wants to see you. I'm working. Nina will cover your section. Not a request. Rowan followed him through the familiar path to the second floor, her heart hammering with every step. She hadn't been up here since that night 2 weeks ago, hadn't wanted to risk running into Lucien when she still didn't know if she wanted to hit him or... She cut that thought off before it could finish. Marcus led her to a different door this time, not the penthouse. A smaller office, still expensive, still private, but more business than living space. He knocked once and opened it. Lucien sat behind a desk covered in papers and laptop screens. He didn't look up right away. and Rowan used the time to study him. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. His shirt was rumpled, sleeves rolled up, like he'd been working for hours without a break. "Close the door," he said without looking up. Marcus left. Rowan closed the door and stood there, not sure if she should sit or speak, or just wait for whatever punishment was coming for the things she'd said. Lucien finally looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes hit her like a physical blow. "I owe you an apology." That was not what she'd expected. "What?" "I was out of line. 2 weeks ago, in the private room." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with that same clinical assessment she remembered from her first night. "I had no right to dig into your past without permission. No right to offer to—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "To solve your problems my way." Rowan's throat closed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've spent 2 weeks thinking about what you said, about being a different kind of person than the one who makes problems disappear. And you're right, you are. But I'm not. And that's the issue." "I don't understand." Lucien stood and moved to the windows. A different view than the penthouse, but still Chicago spread out below like broken glass. 7 years ago, I watched my sister get killed by a man who thought he owned her. Boyfriend. Charming on the outside, monster underneath. He put her in the hospital twice before she finally left him. 3 weeks later, he tracked her down and shot her in a parking lot because if he couldn't have her, nobody could. Horror flooded through Rowan. "Lucien!" "The police did nothing, called it a crime of passion. He got 15 years, served 8, and walked out while I was building this." He gestured vaguely at the building around them. "So when you walked into my office 3 months ago with a fading bruise and that look in your eyes, the same look she had, I decided no one was going to touch you the way he touched her. Not while I could stop it. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. That's why you've been protecting me. That's why I've been suffocating you." He turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his expression made her chest ache. "Nina's right. I don't do casual. I don't do normal. When I care about someone, I hold on too tight because I already lost one person I couldn't protect. And I can't—" His voice cracked slightly. "I can't watch it happen again." Rowan crossed the room before she knew what she was doing, stood in front of him with her heart in her throat and all her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I'm not your sister." "I know. And Grant's not your sister's killer." "But he could be." Lucien's eyes burned into hers. "That's the problem. Men like him don't stop. They escalate. And I've spent 3 months waiting for him to find you and prove me right. So what was your plan?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Kill him before he had the chance?" "Yes." The honesty of it stole her breath. No justification, no explanation, just yes. "That's insane. That's protection. That's obsession." Rowan's voice rose. "You don't get to decide who lives or dies based on what they might do." "I decide every day." Lucien's voice went cold again, distant. "That's what running a business like this means. Every deal I make, every person I protect, every threat I eliminate, it's all decisions about who gets to walk away and who doesn't. I'm not a good man, Rebecca. I never pretended to be." "Stop calling me that. It's your name." "It was my name. I left her behind when I left him." Rowan's hands were shaking. "Rowan is who I am now. That's the person you've been protecting. Then who am I protecting her from? Because from where I stand, the biggest threat to Rowan Vale is that she's still running from Rebecca Chen's past." The truth of it hit like a slap. Rowan stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't know how to stop running." "Then let me make it stop." "By killing him?" "By removing the reason you're afraid." "And then what?" The words exploded out of her. "You remove Grant, and I'm supposed to what? Be grateful? Owe you? Belong to you because you solved my problem with murder?" Lucien flinched, actual, visible pain crossing his features. "Is that what you think I want?" "I don't know what you want." Rowan's voice broke. "One minute you're giving me a job and keeping your distance. Next you're admitting you've been following me and investigating my past and offering to kill the man who hurt me. I can't." She pressed her hands to her face, fighting tears. "I don't know how to be around you without feeling like I'm drowning." The silence stretched between them, heavy, and suffocating. Then Lucian said quietly, "I want you to be safe. That's all I've ever wanted." "At what cost?" "Any cost." He moved closer, and this time she didn't back away. "That's the difference between us. You think there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, rules that matter even when breaking them would save you. I don't. I crossed every line that mattered years ago, and I'd cross them again if it meant you didn't have to." Rowan looked up at him through tears she refused to let fall. "That's not love. That's possession." "Maybe." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "But it's the only thing I know how to give." The touch broke something in her. Rowan leaned into his palm without meaning to, starving for warmth after 3 months of running cold. "I can't be what you need me to be. I don't need you to be anything except alive. That's not enough." "It is for me." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, right where the bruise used to be. "Stay or go. I'll keep you safe either way. But if you stay, you need to know what that means. You need to understand the kind of man you're trusting with your life." "I already know." The words came out whispered. "You're dangerous." "Yes." "You've hurt people." "Yes." "You'd hurt more people if it meant protecting me." His eyes burned into hers, gray as smoke and twice as deadly. "Yes." Rowan should have run, should have jerked away from his touch and walked out and never looked back. Instead, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a press of lips, but it detonated between them like a bomb. Lucien froze for a heartbeat. Then his hand slid into her hair and he kissed her back with the kind of desperate hunger that came from weeks of careful distance finally shattering. Rowan grabbed his shirt to keep from falling, her head spinning, her body remembering what it felt like to be touched by someone who wanted her instead of owned her. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, even though every survival instinct screamed that this was the trap she'd been avoiding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stop." "I can't." "Tell me to let you go." "I won't." "Then we're both fucked." But he smiled when he said it, a real smile that made him look younger, less dangerous, almost human. Rowan laughed despite everything. "Probably." They stood there in the middle of his office, holding each other like drowning people gripping driftwood, and Rowan felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble into dust. She'd run from Grant because staying meant dying slowly. But staying here with Lucien, letting him pull her into his dark, violent world, might mean dying quickly instead. The difference was she'd at least die choosing it. "I need you to understand something," Lucian said quietly, his breath warm against her skin. "If you do this, if you let me in, I'm not going to be able to let you go. That's not a threat. It's a warning. I don't know how to care about people halfway. I don't know how to trust people at all." Rowan pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "So, I guess we're both learning." He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth. When he pulled away, his expression had shifted into something deadly serious. "If Grant finds you, he won't. But if he does, then we'll deal with it." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Together, without murder. Promise me." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I can't promise that." "Then promise you'll try." The pause stretched between them, heavy with everything he wasn't saying. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and reluctant. "I'll try." It wasn't enough, but it was all she was going to get. They left the office together, Lucian's hand resting on the small of her back like a brand. Nina gave them one look from behind the bar, and her expression went carefully blank. The kind of blank that meant she saw everything and disapproved of all of it, but knew better than to say so out loud. Rowan worked the rest of her shift hyper-aware of Lucian's presence. He was back on the balcony, watching again. But now she knew what that watching meant. Protection and possession so tangled together, there was no separating them. Around 2 a.m., Marcus appeared at her section. "Boss says you're done for the night. I'll drive you home." "I can take the bus." "Boss says I'm driving you home." Marcus's expression left no room for argument. She followed him out to the parking garage, where a black sedan with tinted windows sat waiting. The drive to her apartment took 10 minutes through quiet streets. Marcus didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just pulled up to her building and waited while she got out. "He's not a bad man," Marcus said suddenly, just as she was closing the door. "He's just a man who's seen bad things happen to people he cares about. Makes him paranoid, makes him dangerous, but not bad." Rowan didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went inside. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in. She stripped off Lucian's jacket, her jacket now apparently, and fell into bed fully clothed. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by dreams where Grant's face kept morphing into Lucian's, and she couldn't tell which one was reaching for her throat. She woke up at noon to 17 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize and a voicemail that made her blood turn to ice. "Hey, Becca. Long time." Grant's voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, controlled, with that edge of violence underneath. "Took me a while to track you down, but I always knew you'd run somewhere you thought you'd be safe. Chicago's nice, lots of places to hide, but not from me, baby. Never from me. We need to talk. I'll see you soon." The phone fell from her shaking hands. He'd found her. After 3 months of careful hiding, of fake names and burner phones and never using the same coffee shop twice, Grant had found her. Rowan's first instinct was to pack, grab her bag, her cash, and run. Again. Another city, another name, another life spent looking over her shoulder. But even as her hands reached for her backpack, she knew it wouldn't work. Grant had found her once. He'd find her again. Running only delayed the inevitable. Her second instinct, the one that terrified her, was to call Lucian. Because Lucian had offered to make Grant disappear, had promised protection, had looked at her with those gray eyes and said, "I'll keep you safe," like it was a fact instead of a hope. But calling Lucian meant crossing a line she couldn't uncross, meant admitting she needed the kind of help that came with blood and violence and secrets that would tie her to him forever. Her phone buzzed. Another voicemail. "I know you're scared, Becca. I know you think running was the right choice, but we had something good. We can have it again. I've changed. I'm getting help, therapy, anger management, all of it. Just give me a chance to show you." A pause. "Or don't. Either way, I'm coming to get you. 3 days. That's how long you have to decide if you're going to come willingly or if I have to remind you why you fell in love with me in the first place." The threat was crystal clear. Come back or face consequences. Rowan's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone again. 3 days? That's all she had before Grant showed up and dragged her back into the nightmare she'd barely escaped. She looked at her backpack, her small apartment, the life she'd been trying to build from ashes. Then she looked at Lucian's jacket hanging on the back of her door. "I don't know how to care about people halfway," he'd said. "If you let me in, I'm not going to be able to let you go." Rowan grabbed her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Rowan?" Lucian sounded alert despite the early hour. "What's wrong?" "He found me." Her voice came out broken, terrified. "Grant found me. He's coming in 3 days and I can't. Where are you?" "My apartment. Stay there. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Marcus or me." His voice had gone cold and deadly. "I'm on my way." "Lucian, 20 minutes. Stay on the phone with me." She did. She sat on her bed with the phone pressed to her ear while Lucian talked in that quiet, controlled voice about nothing important, the weather, the club, anything to keep her grounded. She heard him moving, heard the sound of an engine starting, heard him giving orders to someone else in clipped, efficient tones. Exactly 19 minutes later, someone knocked on her door. "It's me," Lucian called through the wood. Rowan opened it and fell into his arms before she could stop herself. He caught her easily, holding her against his chest while she shook apart. His heart beat steady under her ear, strong and constant, and she grabbed onto that rhythm like a lifeline. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "Start from the beginning." She did. The voicemails, the threats, the 3-day deadline. Lucian listened without interrupting, his arms tight around her, his jaw getting progressively harder with each detail. When she finished, he pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes had gone cold, not angry exactly, but calculating, like he was already running through scenarios and eliminating the ones that didn't end with Grant Mercer buried. "You're not going back," he said. It wasn't a question. "No. And you're not running again." "I don't think I can." Rowan's voice broke. He'll just find me. He always finds me. Then we make sure he regrets finding you. Lucian cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I told you, what's mine, I protect. You're mine now. That means he goes through me to get to you, and no one gets through me. The possessiveness should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time in 3 months. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. He kissed her forehead, gentle despite the violence in his voice. Pack a bag. You're staying with me until this is handled. At the club? At my place. At the real one. The penthouse above Obsidian is for show. My actual home is somewhere Grant Mercer will never find. He pulled out his phone and fired off a text. Marcus is coming. He'll get you there safely. I have some calls to make. Lucien. She grabbed his arm. Don't kill him, please. I know what he did. I know what he is, but I don't want his death on my conscience. His expression went carefully blank. You sure? I'm sure. Even if that means he might come back? Might try again? Even then. Rowan's throat tightened. Because if you kill him for me, I'll never know if I stayed with you because I wanted to or because I owed you, and I need to know. Something flickered in Lucian's eyes, understanding maybe, or respect. He nodded once. Then I won't kill him. But I'm going to make sure he understands what happens if he ever comes near you again. That's non-negotiable. Okay. He kissed her, hard and desperate and brief, then left before she could change her mind. Rowan packed with shaking hands. Clothes, toiletries, the cash she'd been saving, everything she owned fit in one backpack. The story of her life. Always ready to run, never staying long enough to need more. Marcus showed up 15 minutes later. He took one look at her face and his expression softened. You're safe now. Boss won't let anything happen to you. I know. She followed him down to the sedan. The drive took them out of her neighborhood and deeper into Chicago's expensive districts. The kind of places where buildings had security gates and doormen and cameras on every corner. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a high-rise that looked like it cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Top floor, Marcus said, handing her a key card. Elevator's biometric, but this'll get you through for now. Boss is having your prints added to the system. Rowan took the card with numb fingers. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay alive. That's all he wants. She rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40. It didn't stop until 48, the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Chicago spread out in every direction. The space was all clean lines and expensive furniture, but unlike the showroom perfection of the club penthouse, this place felt lived in. Books on shelves, a jacket thrown over a chair, coffee cups in the sink. This was where Lucian actually lived. Rowan walked through the space in a daze, taking in details. A bedroom with a bed big enough to get lost in. A bathroom with a shower that probably cost more than her car. A kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use. And everywhere, the sense that she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. She set her backpack down in the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Grant. 2 days now, Becca. Clock's ticking. I'm already in Chicago. Already know which neighborhood you're hiding in. It's only a matter of time before I find your exact address. We can do this easy, or we can do this hard. Your choice. Rowan deleted the message without listening to the rest. Her hands were still shaking when Lucian walked through the door 6 hours later. He looked like he'd been in a fight. Shirt rumpled, a cut above his eyebrow, his knuckles wrapped in bandages. What happened? Rowan was on her feet before she knew she was moving. Sent a message. His voice was flat, exhausted. Made some calls. Reached out to people who know people. Grant Mercer is about to have a very bad week. You promised. I promised I wouldn't kill him. I didn't promise I wouldn't make his life hell. Lucian moved to the kitchen and poured himself a drink. By morning, his bank accounts will be frozen pending an IRS investigation. His boss will receive an anonymous tip about embezzlement. His car will get towed from his hotel parking lot for unpaid tickets. And every cop in this district will have his description flagged as a person of interest in an ongoing harassment case. Rowan stared at him. That's how... I know people. He drained the glass in one swallow. That'll buy us time. Won't stop him permanently, but it'll slow him down enough that we can plan next steps. What next steps? Lucian looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. The kind where you don't run anymore, where you stop being afraid because I make sure there's nothing left to be afraid of. Rowan buried her face in his chest and tried not to think about what kind of man could make an entire life implode with a few phone calls. Tried not to wonder what it meant that the same man was holding her like she was something precious instead of something he owned. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Fear keeps you smart. His arms tightened. But you're not alone anymore. That's the difference. They stood there at the middle of his penthouse while the city glittered below, and Grant Mercer's deadline counted down like a timer on a bomb. And Rowan realized with terrible clarity that she'd stopped running because she'd found something more dangerous than Grant Mercer ever was. She'd found someone she was willing to stay for. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of waiting and tension. Lucian worked from home, making calls in low voices while Rowan paced the apartment like a caged animal. Marcus came and went with updates. Nina showed up with food and a first aid kit and a look that said she knew exactly how stupid both of them were being, but loved them anyway. And through it all, Grant's voicemails kept coming. One day left, Becca. I'm close now, can feel it. This is your last chance. Tomorrow I'm coming for you whether you're ready or not. On the final night, Rowan stood at the windows watching storm clouds roll in across Lake Michigan. Lightning flickered in the distance. Rain was coming. She could smell it in the air. Lucian appeared behind her, his reflection visible in the glass. You don't have to be here for this. Where else would I be? Somewhere safe. I am somewhere safe. She turned to face him. With you. His expression cracked slightly, showing the fear underneath. If anything happens, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, Rowan grabbed his face and kissed him hard enough to shut him up. When she pulled back, his eyes were burning. Stop. We're going to handle this together. That's what you promised. Together. Together, he agreed quietly. They were still standing there when Marcus called. He's here, just pulled up outside her old apartment building. Want me to? No. Lucian's voice went cold. Let him knock on an empty door. Let him figure out she's gone. Then follow him. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, every move he makes. Copy that. Lucian hung up and pulled Rowan against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering, matching the rhythm of her own. Outside, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed seconds later, close enough to rattle the windows. The storm had arrived, and somewhere in Chicago, Grant Mercer was realizing his prey had disappeared. Rowan closed her eyes and held on to Lucian like he was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control. Tomorrow they'd figure out next steps. Tomorrow they'd build a plan that didn't end in blood. Tonight, she just needed to survive the waiting. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Lucian's arms tightened. Don't answer it. But Rowan's hand was already reaching, because this was her nightmare to face, her past to confront. And she was done running. She answered. Hello, Becca. Grant's voice was smooth, conversational. You weren't home. That's disappointing. Made me realize something, though. You're not hiding anymore. You've found yourself a protector. A pause. Tell your new boyfriend I'm coming for you both. And when I find you, I'm going to make him watch while I remind you exactly who you belong to. The line went dead. Rowan stood there with the phone shaking in her hand while lightning turned the penthouse white and thunder shook the walls. Lucian grabbed the phone, listened to the silence, and something terrible crossed his face. He knows, Rowan whispered. He knows about you. Good. Lucian's voice was dead calm, but his eyes had gone cold as winter. That makes this easier. Lucien, you wanted me to try not killing him. He looked at her then, and the man staring back wasn't the one who'd held her gently or kissed her softly. This was the man who made problems disappear, the one who crossed every line without hesitation. I tried. He just made that impossible. What are you going to do? Lucian pulled out his phone and made a call. When someone answered, he said quietly, Grant Mercer. Find him. Bring him to the usual place, alive. I want to have a conversation. He hung up and turned to Rowan. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Marcus or Nina. I'll be back before morning. Let me come with you. No. The word was absolute. This is my world, and you don't belong in it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But tonight, I'm going into the dark, and I'm not dragging you with me. He kissed her once, desperately, like he was memorizing the taste, then walked out. Rowan stood alone in the penthouse as the storm raged outside, realizing too late that she'd crossed the point of no return. She wasn't Rebecca Chen anymore, the girl who ran. She wasn't quite Rowan Vale either, the ghost who hid. She was something new, something dangerous. She was the woman Lucien Veyer loved enough to. She was the woman Lucien Veyer loved enough to kill for, and that realization terrified her more than anything Grant had ever done. Rowan stood at the windows watching lightning tear holes in the sky while her mind spun through scenarios she didn't want to imagine. Lucien had gone into the dark to do things she'd asked him not to do. Things that would bind her to him in ways that had nothing to do with choice and everything to do with blood. She should leave. Walk out right now while he was gone. Take her backpack and disappear into the storm and never look back. But her feet stayed planted, her hands pressed against the cold glass. Her reflection stared back at her like an accusation. You wanted this, it seemed to say. You called him. You asked for protection. Now you get to live with what that protection costs. The hours crawled past. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. 2. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering the windows hard enough to rattle them in their frames. Rowan paced the penthouse like something caged, checking her phone obsessively even though she knew Lucien wouldn't call. Whatever he was doing happened in silence. At 3:17 a.m., the elevator chimed. Rowan spun toward the sound, her heart in her throat. The doors opened and Lucien stepped out. He looked like he'd walked through hell, clothes soaked from the rain, blood on his shirt that might or might not be his face a mask of exhaustion and something darker, something that looked like guilt. Is he dead? The words came out before Rowan could stop them. Lucien's eyes met hers. No. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. Where is he? Somewhere he can't hurt you. Lucien moved past her toward the bathroom. That's all you need to know. That's not... Rowan followed him. You can't just drop that and walk away. What did you do? He turned on the shower without looking at her, started unbuttoning his shirt. I had a conversation, made some things very clear. Grant Mercer won't be a problem anymore. What kind of conversation? The kind that involves broken fingers and a lot of screaming. He stripped off the bloody shirt, and Rowan saw bruises blooming across his ribs. He's alive. He's breathing. But he understands now what happens if he ever says your name again. Horror and relief warred in Rowan's chest. You tortured him. I educated him. Lucien's voice was flat, empty. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Yes, there is. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her step back. Education means he gets to walk away. Torture would have been slower, more permanent. I gave him education because you asked me not to kill him, so congratulate yourself. Your mercy saved his life. The words hit like slaps. Rowan's throat closed. Don't put this on me. I'm not putting anything on you, I'm telling you what happened. He stepped into the shower, letting the water run red. Grant Mercer is on a plane back to Columbus right now with a very clear understanding that if he ever comes back to Chicago, if he ever looks for you, if he ever so much as thinks about you too hard, he dies slowly. That's the deal. That's your freedom. You're welcome. The bathroom door closed between them. Rowan stood there shaking, her mind trying to process what she'd just heard. Lucien had hurt Grant, broken his fingers, made him scream, all to keep her safe. All because she'd called him and asked for help, and now Grant was on a plane, broken and terrified, and she should feel relieved. But all she felt was sick. She walked back to the windows on numb legs. The storm was starting to clear, clouds breaking apart to reveal stars underneath. Chicago glittered below like nothing had happened. Like somewhere in this city, a man hadn't been tortured because of her. The shower ran for 20 minutes. When Lucien finally emerged, he was clean, but the exhaustion in his face had deepened into something close to despair. He didn't look at her, just moved to the bedroom and started pulling on fresh clothes. You should sleep, he said quietly. It's over. You're safe now. I don't feel safe. The words came out broken. I feel like I just became complicit in something I can't take back. Lucien's hand stilled on his shirt. You want to know what I did? The details? No. I tied him to a chair in a warehouse I use for things I don't want traced back to me. His voice was clinical, detached. Asked him politely to leave Chicago and never contact you again. He laughed. Said I didn't scare him. Said he'd find you eventually, and when he did, he'd make me watch while he reminded you who you belonged to. Lucian's jaw tightened. So I broke his left index finger, asked again. He spit in my face. I broke another one. By the fourth finger, he was crying. By the fifth, he was begging. By the sixth, he was promising anything I wanted if I'd just stop. Rowan's stomach turned. Stop. You wanted to know. Now you know. He turned to face her, and his eyes were dead. I didn't enjoy it. Didn't get off on his pain, but I didn't feel bad about it either. Because men like Grant Mercer only understand one language, and I'm fluent in it, so I spoke until he understood. Then I put him on a plane and told him if I ever heard his name again, I'd finish what I started. The silence between them was suffocating. I should never have called you, Rowan whispered. But you did. Lucien's voice was gentle now, almost sad. And I came, because that's what I do. That's what I am, and you knew that before you dialed. He was right. She had known, had looked at Lucien Weyer and seen exactly what he was, a dangerous man who solved problems with violence. And she'd called him anyway because she'd been too scared to face Grant alone. I can't stay here, Rowan said. You're not going anywhere. Not a threat, just a fact. You can't keep me. I'm not keeping you. Lucien moved closer, and this time she didn't back away. But you're not leaving tonight. Not when you're upset and scared and likely to do something stupid like go back to your apartment where Grant might have left surprises. Tomorrow, when the sun's up and you've had time to think, you can decide what you want. But tonight you stay. That's non-negotiable. Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to scream at him that he didn't get to decide where she stayed or went, but exhaustion was pulling at her bones, and the thought of going back out into the city alone made her chest tight with panic. Fine, she said. Tonight. Then I'm gone. Lucien's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. Okay. He left her alone in the bedroom, and Rowan collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. Sleep came eventually, broken by nightmares where Grant's screams mixed with Lucian's calm voice, and she couldn't tell which one was the monster anymore. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. Her body ached like she'd been in a fight. Her head throbbed. She stumbled out of the bedroom and found Lucien in the kitchen, dressed in fresh clothes, looking like he'd slept even less than she had. Coffee's fresh, he said without looking at her. There's food if you want it. Rowan poured herself a cup with shaking hands. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, she said, I meant what I said last night. I can't stay here. I know. I need space, time to think. I know that too. He set down his own cup and finally looked at her. Your apartment is secure. Marcus swept it this morning. No bugs, no cameras, no signs Grant was ever there. You can go back if you want. And if I don't want to come back here? Pain flickered across his face. Then you don't come back. I told you before, you're free to leave any time. I meant it. Even after... She gestured vaguely. After everything? Especially after everything. Lucian's voice was quiet. I did what I did to keep you safe, not to trap you. If being safe means being away from me, then go. I'll live with it. The resignation in his voice made her chest ache. Rowan set down her coffee before she dropped it. I don't know what I want. That's fair. He moved toward the elevator. Marcus is downstairs. He'll take you wherever you need to go. Your job at Obsidian is yours if you want it. If you don't, Nina will have your final pay ready. No questions asked. That's it? You're just letting me walk away? Lucien stopped with his hand on the elevator button. What did you expect? For me to lock you in here? Chain you to the bed until you fell in love with the cage? He looked at her over his shoulder and his eyes were gray as winter. I'm a lot of things, Rowan, but I'm not him. You want to leave? You leave. Doors open. The elevator arrived. He stepped inside. Wait. Rowan didn't know what she was going to say until the words came out. Where are you going? To work. People to see. Problems to solve. The doors started to close. Take care of yourself. Then he was gone. Rowan stood alone in the penthouse feeling like she'd just lost something she couldn't name. Part of her wanted to chase after him. The other part, the smarter part that remembered how to survive, told her to pack her bag and run while she still could. She chose the middle path, went back to her apartment, tried to pretend the last 12 hours hadn't happened. It worked for exactly 3 days. 3 days of showing up at Obsidian for her shifts and trying not to look for Lucien in the shadows. 3 days of Nina watching her with knowing eyes but saying nothing. 3 days of lying in her bed at night wearing his jacket because it still smelled like him and hating herself for being weak enough to care. On the 4th day, everything shattered. She was working her section when Marcus appeared at her elbow. His expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes made her stomach drop. You need to come with me. Now. I'm working. Now. His hand landed on her arm, not rough but insistent. Nina's covering your tables. Fear spiked through her. What's wrong? Is Lucien? Just come. He led her through the back halls to a door she'd never been through before. It opened onto a staircase going down, not up toward the offices, but down into what looked like a basement level. The walls were concrete. The lighting was harsh. Every instinct Rowan had screamed at her to turn around. But Marcus kept walking, and she followed because not knowing felt worse than whatever she was walking into. At the bottom of the stairs, another door. Marcus opened it and gestured her through. He's inside. Rowan stepped into what looked like a storage room, boxes stacked along walls, industrial shelving, a single light hanging from the ceiling. And in the center of the room, sitting in a metal chair with his hands zip-tied to the armrests, was Grant Mercer. Her entire world tilted. He looked worse than she'd imagined. His face was a mess of bruises turning yellow-green. Both hands were wrapped in bandages. His eyes, when they found her, were wide with terror and rage mixed together into something poisonous. Becca, he said, and his voice was rough like he'd been screaming. Thank God. Tell these psychos to let me go. What is this? Rowan spun toward Marcus, but he was already gone, the door closing behind him with a final sounding click. She was alone with Grant for the first time in 3 months, and her entire body locked up with primal fear. This is a mistake, Grant said quickly. His eyes were darting around the room like he was looking for escape routes. I came back to apologize. To tell you I'm sorry. I never should have hurt you. I was sick, Becca. Sick in the head. But I'm better now. Therapy, medication, everything. I just needed to see you one more time to tell you, you're lying. The words came out flat. Lucien said he put you on a plane back to Columbus. I got off in Cleveland, came back. Because I love you, Becca. I love you. And I can't let you throw away what we had because some rich asshole convinced you he could protect you better than I could. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. You put me in the hospital. I was out of control. You broke my ribs, gave me a concussion, threatened to kill me if I ever left. I was sick. Grant's voice rose, that familiar edge of violence creeping back in. But I'm better now. We can start over, fresh. I'll prove it to you. Just tell your boyfriend to let me go and we can talk like adults. The door opened behind her. Rowan turned and felt the ground drop out from under her feet. Lucien walked in, followed by 2 men she didn't recognize. All 3 wore expressions that could have been carved from stone, and in Lucien's hand was a gun. What are you doing? Rowan's voice came out barely above a whisper. Finishing what I started. Lucien's eyes never left Grant. I told you what would happen if you came back. You came back. Now you pay. No. Rowan stepped between them without thinking. You promised. You said he was on a plane. You said it was over. It was over. Lucien's voice was dead calm. Then he got off the plane. Came back to Chicago. Spent 3 days asking around about you. Showed up at 2 different clubs looking for a girl matching your description. He broke the deal, so now I break him. Grant was making sounds behind her, whimpering, begging. Rowan ignored him. Her entire focus was on Lucien and the cold emptiness in his eyes. Put the gun down. No. Lucien, please. Move, Rowan. Not a request. An order. I won't let you do this. You don't get a choice. He raised the gun, aiming past her at Grant's head. This is what happens in my world. You break the rules, you pay the price. He knew that, He came back anyway. His funeral. If you kill him, you lose me. The words exploded out of her. Forever. You pull that trigger and I walk out that door and you never see me again. Lucian's hand didn't waver. I can live with that. Can you? Rowan moved closer, her voice breaking. Because I don't think you can. I think you'd rather die than watch me leave. So put the gun down and we figure this out together, like you promised. For a long moment, nothing moved. The room held its breath. Lucien Bastian's finger rested on the trigger, his eyes locked on Grant's terrified face, and Rowan saw him calculating, weighing her life against Grant's death, protection against possession, love against violence. Then his hand lowered. Relief crashed through her so hard her knees almost buckled. Thank you. You're right, Lucien said quietly. I can't live without you, which is why we're doing this differently. He turned to one of the men behind him. Get him on a plane, real one this time. Make sure he gets to Columbus, and make sure he understands that if he ever says her name again, I won't be this merciful. The men moved forward. Grant was screaming now, begging Rowan to help him, to save him, to remember what they'd had. She stood there frozen as they cut him loose and dragged him toward the door. His voice echoed down the hallway long after he disappeared. Then silence. Rowan turned to Lucien and something inside her fractured. You brought me down here to watch. I brought you down here to make a choice. His voice was empty. Him or me. His life or your conscience. You chose. Now you get to live with it. That's not... You can't... Her voice broke. You manipulated me. Made me think I had power when the whole thing was already decided. I gave you exactly what you asked for. A chance to save him. You did. He's alive. Breathing. On a plane to Columbus where he'll spend the rest of his miserable life looking over his shoulder. Lucien moved closer, and she saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of whatever this had cost him. But don't pretend you didn't know what you were choosing. You knew the second you called me that this was the kind of help I'd give. Violence, control, protection that looks a lot like possession. You knew, and you called anyway, because you were more scared of him than you were of me. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Rowan's throat closed. I hate you. I know. His voice was gentle, almost kind. But you need me more than you hate me. That's the problem. He walked out, leaving her alone in the concrete room with the echo of Grant's screams and the terrible knowledge that Lucien was right. She had known, had chosen. And now she got to live with what that choice made her. The next week passed in a fog. Rowan worked her shifts like an automaton, smiled when necessary, served drinks, collected tips, went home to her apartment and stared at the walls until dawn. Didn't call Lucien, didn't go to his penthouse, didn't ask Marcus about him, even though the question burned in her throat every time she saw the driver. She was trying to prove something. To herself, to Lucien, to the universe. That she could survive without him. That she didn't need his protection, or his money, or his dark, dangerous attention. It lasted exactly 9 days. On day 9, Nina cornered her in the employee lounge. You're being stupid. I'm being smart, Rowan shot back. You're being scared. There's a difference. Nina sat down across from her, her sharp eyes tracking every flinch. Lucien Vert is a lot of things. Dangerous, controlling, probably clinically incapable of healthy emotional boundaries. But he loves you. Real love. The kind that would burn this city down if it meant keeping you safe. That's not love. That's obsession. Sometimes they're the same thing. Nina leaned forward. You think I don't know what he did? What he's been doing since you walked away? He's been tracking Grant Mercer every second of every day. Making sure he stays in Columbus. Making sure he goes to therapy like he promised. Making sure he doesn't so much as look at a computer to search your name. That's not control for control's sake. That's a man who knows the only thing between you and a nightmare is his willingness to stay in the dark. Rowan's chest tightened. He shouldn't have to do that. But he does, because you asked him to keep you safe. And Lucien Vert doesn't do anything halfway. Nina stood. You want to walk away? Walk away. But stop pretending you're leaving because he's too dangerous. You're leaving because you're terrified of how much you need him. And that's cowardice. She left before Rowan could argue. That night, Rowan lay in bed staring at the ceiling and forced herself to face the truth. She wasn't staying away from Lucien because he'd manipulated her. She was staying away because he'd shown her exactly who she was, someone willing to trade violence for safety, someone who could stand in a concrete room and choose a man suffering over her own moral certainty, and she hated herself for it. But more than that, and this was the part that terrified her, she was starting to accept it. On day 12, Marcus showed up at her apartment at 2 a.m. Rowan opened the door with her heart hammering, already knowing something was wrong. What happened? Boss got jumped. 3 guys outside the club. He's alive, but Marcus's expression was grim. You should come. She followed him without grabbing shoes, rode the elevator to the penthouse in bare feet and sleep clothes. Marcus used his key card, and the doors opened onto chaos. The penthouse looked like a war zone. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, blood on the floor. And in the center of it all, Lucien sat on the couch while Nina cleaned a gash above his eye. His face was a mess of bruises, his shirt was torn, but his eyes, when they found Rowan's, were clear. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Marcus said. Her voice broke. What happened? Someone sent a message. He winced as Nina pressed something to the cut. 3 guys with bats and a very clear statement about staying out of territory that doesn't belong to me. What territory? The kind that involves trafficking routes and protection rackets. Things I've been systematically dismantling for the last 5 years. His jaw tightened. Made some people angry. They decided to remind me what happens when you disrupt their business. Rowan's blood ran cold. They could have killed you. They tried. Lucien gestured to the wreckage. Didn't take. Nina stood. I'll give you 2 some privacy. She left with a look that said Rowan better not waste this chance. The silence stretched between them. Rowan stood there in her bare feet, an oversized shirt, staring at the man who'd just been beaten because he'd been fighting battles she didn't even know existed. Why didn't you tell me? She finally asked. Tell you what? That running a club like Obsidian means getting my hands dirty with things most people don't want to know about? Lucien's voice was tired. You were already struggling with what I did to Grant. Didn't see the point in adding corporate espionage and gang warfare to the list. I want to know. The words came out stronger than she felt. Everything. No more secrets, no more protection. If I'm going to be in your life, I need to know what that actually means. Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Sit down. This is going to take a while. She sat, and he told her everything. About the sister who died. About the years he spent building Obsidian from nothing, using it as a front to take down the same networks that had killed her. About the trafficking rings he'd dismantled, the corrupt cops he'd bought or buried, the politicians he had in his pocket, the bodies he'd buried, sometimes literally, to make Chicago safer for people who didn't even know they were in danger. He told her about the enemies he'd made, the threats that came weekly, the constant balancing act of appearing legitimate while operating in shadows so dark most people couldn't see them. And he told her about the cost, the isolation, the inability to trust anyone, the way violence had become so normal he sometimes forgot what peace felt like. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking over Chicago, and Rowan's entire understanding of who Lucien Vare was had been rewritten. So that's it, he said quietly. That's the man you've been sleeping with, the one you called when you needed help. I'm not a nightclub owner who dabbles in crime. I'm a criminal who uses a nightclub as cover. And if you stay, if you choose this, you're choosing all of it. The danger, the violence, the knowledge that people want me dead and you might be collateral damage. Rowan sat with that for a long time. Outside, the city woke up, car horns, sirens, the endless noise of life continuing. Inside, everything felt suspended. Finally, she said, Grant's not the only one you've been protecting me from. No. How many others? Does it matter? Yes. Lucien's eyes held hers. 17. In the last 3 months. People asking about you. People Grant sent, or people who just got curious. I made them all disappear before they became problems. The number hit like a punch. 17 people. 17 threats she'd never known existed because Lucien had handled them in silence. You've been protecting me from an entire world I didn't know was there. That's what I do. His voice was raw. I see the threats before they arrive and I eliminate them. It's not healthy. Probably not legal in most cases. But it keeps you safe. Keeps you able to sleep without checking locks 3 times. Keeps you able to walk through Chicago like you belong here instead of like you're still running. Rowan's throat tightened. I don't know if I can live in that world. I know. Pain flickered across his face. That's why I've been staying away. Because you deserve better than this. Better than me. Stop. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the wood floor. Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm a grown woman who's survived things that would break most people. I can decide for myself what I can handle. Can you handle this? Lucian gestured to his beaten face, the destroyed penthouse. Can you handle waking up one day and finding out I didn't come home because someone finally got lucky? Can you handle the knowledge that loving me puts a target on your back? I don't know. The honesty of it hung between them. But I know I can't handle staying away. I tried. For 12 days I tried to prove I didn't need you, and every single night I lay in bed wearing your jacket and hating myself for being weak. Something cracked in Lucien's expression. That's not weakness. That's human. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass. Rowan grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I've survived abuse, homelessness, running for my life. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from reality. I'm a survivor. And if you want me in your life, really in it, then trust me to handle the truth. Even when the truth is ugly? Especially then. They sat there as dawn light filled the penthouse, two broken people who'd found each other in the dark, and were trying to figure out if love was enough to justify the damage they'd cause each other. Finally, Lucian said, Grant's dead. The words hit like ice water. Rowan jerked back. What? 3 days ago, car accident in Columbus. Drove off a bridge drunk. Police ruled it an accident. His eyes never left hers. It wasn't an accident. Horror flooded through her. You said, you promised, I promised I wouldn't kill him. I didn't. One of my people did, quietly, cleanly. Made it look like exactly what Grant was. A drunk asshole who drove too fast. Lucian's voice was empty. He was still asking about you, still planning to come back. So I removed the problem permanently. Rowan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You murdered him. I protected you. By becoming exactly what I was afraid of. What? I've always been exactly what you were afraid of, Lucian's voice cracked. From the first night you walked into Obsidian, I've been a killer, a criminal, a man who solves problems with violence because it's the only language I speak fluently. You just didn't want to see it. Because you lied. I never lied. I just didn't force you to look directly at what I was doing in the shadows. He stood, moving to the windows. Grant Mercer is dead. I had him killed, and I'd do it again tomorrow if it meant you could sleep without nightmares. That's who I am. That's what loving me means. And if you can't handle it, if you can't look at me knowing what I've done, then leave. Right now, because it's only going to get worse from here. Rowan stood on shaking legs. Her entire world had just imploded. Grant was dead, murdered on Lucien's orders. And the man standing in front of her, the man she'd started to love, had just admitted to being exactly the monster she'd always feared. She should run, should pack her bag and disappear before Lucien decided she knew too much and became a liability instead of an asset. But looking at him standing there in the early morning light, beaten, exhausted, stripped of every defense, she saw something else. She saw a man who'd spent 7 years trying to save people from the violence that had killed his sister. A man who'd built an empire of shadows to protect people who didn't even know they needed protecting. A man who'd killed for her because he couldn't survive watching her die the way he'd watched his sister die. I should hate you, she whispered. You should. Lucian didn't turn around. I hate myself most days. But I don't. The words came out broken. I should, but I don't. And that terrifies me more than anything you've done. He turned then, and the look on his face was pure anguish. Then what do you want? Because I don't know how to be different. I don't know how to care about you without destroying anything that threatens you. And I'm so tired of pretending I'm capable of normal when everything about me is broken. Rowan crossed the space between them, took his battered face in her hands. I want the truth. Always. No more protecting me from reality. No more secrets. If you're going to kill someone, I want to know before it happens. If I'm in danger, I want to know the details. If you're fighting a war, I want to know what we're fighting for. That's asking for a lot of darkness. I've lived in darkness before. At least with you, I won't be alone in it. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. You're staying. I'm staying. She kissed him gently, tasting blood and exhaustion. But on my terms. Equal partners. No more decisions made without me. No more treating me like something you own instead of someone you love. I can try. That's all I'm asking. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. But Lucien, if you ever lie to me again, if you ever go behind my back, if you ever make me complicit in violence without my knowledge, I'm gone. Forever. Understand? I understand. They stood there in the ruined penthouse holding each other while Chicago woke up below, and Rowan tried not to think about the fact that she'd just agreed to love a killer. Tried not to wonder what that made her. The answer came 2 weeks later when someone tried to burn down Obsidian with both of them inside. Rowan was working her shift when the fire alarms started screaming. Smoke filled the main floor within seconds. Thick, black, chemical. People ran for the exits in blind panic. Rowan fought against the crowd, looking for Lucien, her lungs burning. She found him on the second floor trying to get people out of the private rooms. His face was covered in soot. Blood ran from a cut on his temple. When he saw her, relief and fury crossed his face in equal measure. Get out! Not without you! An explosion ripped through the floor below. The building shook. Fire roared up the stairwell like something alive. They were cut off from the main exits, trapped on the second floor with flames climbing fast and no way down. Lucien grabbed her hand. The roof! Now! They ran through smoke so thick Rowan couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Her eyes streamed. Her throat felt raw. Lucien pulled her through hallways she didn't recognize until they burst through a door onto the roof. Cold air hit like a slap. Rowan gasped, coughing so hard she nearly vomited. Below them, Obsidian burned like a funeral pyre. Sirens wailed in the distance. People crowded the street, staff, customers, everyone who'd made it out. There! Lucien pointed to the next building, maybe 15 feet away. A gap a person could jump if they were desperate enough. You first. I can't. You can. He grabbed her shoulders. I've seen you survive worse. Jump. I'll be right behind you. Rowan looked at the gap, looked at the fire below, looked at Lucien's face and saw the truth there. He wasn't planning to follow. He was planning to make sure she got out and then do something stupid and heroic and fatal. No, she said. Rowan, we go together or not at all. She grabbed his hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. You said equal partners, so we jump together, on 3. If we don't make it, then we don't make it. She positioned herself at the edge. 1. Lucien moved beside her, his hand tight in hers. 2. The fire roared below them, flames reaching up like hands trying to pull them down. 3. They jumped. For a moment Rowan was flying, weightless, free. Then her feet hit concrete and pain shot up her legs and she was rolling, tumbling, Lucien's body wrapped around hers, protecting her from the impact. They slid to a stop, tangled together on the neighboring roof, both gasping, both alive. Behind them, part of Obsidian's roof collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. Rowan started laughing. She couldn't help it. They'd just jumped between buildings, just survived an assassination attempt, just lost everything Lucien had built over 7 years. And she was laughing like a maniac while he held her and the city burned. You're insane, Lucien said, but he was laughing too. Learned from the best. She kissed him hard, tasting smoke and blood and survival. Now what? Now? He stood, pulling her up with him. Now we find out who tried to kill us, and we make them regret being born. Looking at him standing there on that rooftop with his empire burning behind him and murder in his eyes, Rowan realized she'd finally crossed the line she'd been afraid of. She wasn't Rebecca Chen anymore, the girl who ran from violence. She wasn't Rowan Vale either, the ghost who hid in shadows. She was whoever this was, someone who could jump between buildings and laugh about it. Someone who could look at a man and see a killer and love him anyway. Someone who'd stopped running from her own capacity for darkness and started running toward it instead. And that realization should have terrified her. Instead, standing there with smoke in her lungs and Lucien's hand in hers and the knowledge that someone wanted them both dead, Rowan felt more alive than she had in. Instead, standing there with smoke in her lungs and Lucien's hand in hers, and the knowledge that someone wanted them both dead, Rowan felt more alive than she had in years. The firefighters arrived within minutes, but by then, Obsidian was already lost. Rowan and Lucien made it down through the neighboring building's service stairs, emerging onto the street where chaos reigned. Emergency vehicles blocked both ends of the block. News cameras were already setting up. People ran in every direction. Some injured, most just panicked. Nina found them in the crowd, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes sharp as ever. Everyone made it out, no casualties, but the club's gone. Completely destroyed. Lucien's jaw tightened. Security footage? Burned with everything else, but I saw 3 men leaving through the back exit right before the alarms went off. Professional. Knew exactly where to plant the accelerant for maximum damage. Faces? Covered, but one of them limped. Old injury looked like. Left leg. Lucien's expression went cold. I know who sent them. Who? Rowan asked. Later. He turned to Nina. Get the staff somewhere safe. Hotels, whatever they need. Use the emergency fund. And get Marcus here. I need eyes on every camera within 6 blocks. Someone saw something. Nina nodded and disappeared into the crowd. A paramedic approached, trying to check Lucien's head wound, but he waved them off. I'm fine. You're bleeding. I said I'm fine. His voice was flat, empty of everything except cold calculation. The man who'd laughed on the rooftop was gone, replaced by something harder. Something that scared Rowan more than the fire had. She grabbed his arm. Don't shut me out, not now. He looked at her and some of the coldness thawed. I'm not shutting you out. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. Then tell me who did this. Lucien pulled her away from the crowd, into the shadow of a building where no cameras could see them. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, I took over 3 trafficking routes from a man named Victor Cade. He ran girls through Chicago, young ones, barely legal, some not even that. I shut him down, destroyed his network, put half his people in prison and the other half in the ground. Rowan's blood ran cold. And now he's back. He got out 6 months ago, early release for good behavior. Lucien's laugh was bitter. I've had people watching him, knew he'd come for me eventually, just didn't expect him to burn down my club with everyone inside. How do you know it was him? The limp. One of his enforcers took a bullet to the knee during our last encounter. Never healed right. Walks like he's got a rod in his leg. His eyes were distant, calculating. Victor doesn't make moves without sending a message first. This is him telling me he's ready for war. So what do we do? We? Lucien's voice sharpened. There's no we in this. You stay somewhere safe while I handle Victor. Like hell. Rowan grabbed his shirt, forcing him to look at her. You said equal partners. That means I don't sit on the sidelines while you go off to get yourself killed. This isn't your fight. You made it my fight the second you put me in your penthouse and made me your responsibility. Her voice rose. I'm not some damsel you get to lock in a tower while you play hero. I'm in this, all the way. So either we do it together, or I follow you anyway and make it messier. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Lucien's expression softened slightly. You're insane. I thought we established that already. If you do this, if you really come with me, you need to understand what that means. Victor Cade doesn't play by rules. He'll use you to get to me, hurt you to make a point. And I can't... His voice cracked. I can't watch another person I love die because of my choices. The word hung between them. Love. He'd said it so casually, like it was fact instead of confession. Rowan reached up and cupped his soot-stained face. Then don't let me die. Fight with me instead of for me. Trust me to be strong enough to survive what comes next. Lucien closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. She kissed him softly. But first we need to survive tonight. Marcus appeared out of the crowd like a ghost. His expression was grim. Got the footage. 3 vehicles left the scene right after the fire started. Tracked 2 of them to a warehouse district in the south side. The 3rd went dark near the docks. Show me. Lucien pulled out his phone. Marcus sent the files. Rowan watched over Lucien's shoulder as grainy security footage played. Three black SUVs with tinted windows, no plates, moving in coordinated formation. Professional. Military precision. How many people does Victor have? She asked. Last count? 15, maybe 20 if he called in favors. Lucien's jaw tightened. We're outnumbered. Then we need backup. I have backup. He made a call. Conversation was brief, clipped. When he hung up, his expression was darker. 10 minutes. Everyone I've got. They waited in the shadow of the building while Chicago continued its chaos around them. Fire trucks pumped water into what remained of obsidian. Police officers took statements. News reporters did live feeds about the mysterious fire that had destroyed one of the city's most exclusive clubs. None of them knew they were standing on the edge of a war. Lucien's people arrived in pieces. First came a woman with close-cropped hair and a scar running down her cheek, introduced only as Kat. Then two brothers who looked like they could break steel with their bare hands. Then more. By the time 10 minutes had passed, Lucien had assembled a small army in the alley behind the burned club. Rowan counted 12 people. All of them moved like soldiers. All of them looked at Lucien with the kind of loyalty that came from blood debts and shared violence. Listen up, Lucien said quietly. The chatter died instantly. Victor Cade sent people to burn down my club with everyone inside. That makes this personal. I'm going after him tonight. Anyone who doesn't want to be part of this war can walk away right now. No judgment, no consequences. Nobody moved. Good. He pulled up the map on his phone. We hit the warehouse in the south side first. That's where his main operation is. Marcus and Kat take point. Rest of you spread out. Watch the exits. Cut off escape routes. I want Victor alive. Everyone else is negotiable. What about collateral? Kat asked. There won't be any. Victor's smart enough not to keep civilians near his operations. Lucien's eyes were cold. But if there are, get them out first. I'm not killing innocent people to make a point. Rowan felt something loosen in her chest. Even in this, even planning what amounted to an assassination, Lucien had lines he wouldn't cross. What about me? She asked. Every eye turned to her. The others looked confused. Clearly they hadn't realized Lucien had brought a civilian into a war council. Marcus looked resigned. Lucien just looked tired. You stay with Nina, he said. No. Rowan, I said no. She stepped forward, meeting each person's eyes. I'm not trained like you. I'm not a fighter, but I'm also not useless. I can drive, I can watch exits. I can do something other than sit in a safe house while you all risk your lives. She's got spine, Kat said, a hint of approval in her voice. I like her. This isn't about spine, Lucien snapped. This is about keeping her alive. Then teach me how to stay alive. Rowan grabbed his arm. One gun. Basic instruction. Put me somewhere I can be useful, but not in the line of fire. Please. The silence stretched. Then Lucien sighed, defeated. Fine. But you stay in the car. You watch the south exit. If anyone comes out that's not us, you call it in. You do not engage. You do not play hero. Understand? Understood. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. Small, black, deadly. Showed her the safety, the trigger, the stance. Point and shoot. That's it. You aim for center mass. You don't hesitate. And you only fire if your life depends on it. Rowan took the gun. It was heavier than she expected. Cold. Real in a way that made her stomach turn. Okay. Say it back to me. I stay in the car. I watch the exit. I call in anyone who leaves. I only shoot if my life depends on it. Good. He pulled her close, kissing her hard enough to bruise. If anything happens to you, it won't. But if it does, then you survive anyway. She pushed him back gently. Because that's what we do. We survive. They moved out in convoy, 3 vehicles heading toward the south side, while the rest of Lucien's people scattered to other positions. Rowan rode with Marcus and Lucien, the gun heavy in her pocket, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The warehouse district was exactly what she expected. Abandoned buildings, broken windows, the kind of place where screams wouldn't attract attention. Marcus parked the car on a side street with clear view of the south exit, cut the engine, checked his own weapon with practiced efficiency. You see anything moves you, radio? he said, handing her a walkie-talkie. Don't try to be brave. We need intel, not bodies. Got it. Lucian leaned over from the back seat, his face serious. If this goes wrong, if we don't come back, you drive straight to the penthouse. There's a safe in the bedroom. Combination is your birthday. Inside is enough cash to disappear. New identity, new life, everything you need. Stop talking like you're going to die. I'm talking like a man who prepares for every outcome. His gray eyes burned into hers. Promise me, if I don't walk out of that building, you take the money and you run. Don't look back. Don't try to avenge me. Just run, and don't stop running. Rowan's throat closed. I promise. He kissed her once more, then climbed out. Marcus followed. Within seconds, they disappeared into the shadows, moving with the kind of silence that came from years of practice. Rowan sat alone in the car, gun in her lap, watching the exit. The waiting was torture. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her jump. She checked the safety on the gun 3 times, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it twice. 10 minutes passed. 20. The radio crackled occasionally with brief updates. In position. Clear on the west side. Movement on the 2nd floor. Then silence. Rowan stared at the warehouse, willing Lucien to walk back out, willing this to be over quickly and cleanly and without bloodshed. The first gunshot shattered that hope. It came from inside the building, loud, sharp, unmistakable. Then another, then a burst of automatic fire that made Rowan's blood turn to ice. The radio exploded with voices. Contact, east side. 3 hostiles, armed, man down, we need... Static. Rowan's hand went to the car door. Every instinct screamed at her to run inside, to help, to do something other than sit here useless while people died. But she'd promised, stay in the car, watch the exit. So she watched. The south exit burst open. 2 men stumbled out, both armed, both bleeding. They looked around wildly, spotted the car, and started running toward it. Rowan's heart stopped. She grabbed the radio. 2 hostiles heading south, armed, and a bullet punched through the windshield 6 inches from her head. She dove sideways, the gun falling to the floor. The men were shooting at her. Actually shooting. Another bullet hit the hood. Then another. Rowan's training, all 30 seconds of it, kicked in. She grabbed the gun, flicked off the safety, and fired blind through the shattered windshield. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The sound was deafening, but one of the men went down, screaming, clutching his leg. The other kept coming. Rowan fired again. Missed. The man was 10 feet away now. 5. Raising his gun. A shot rang out from somewhere behind her. The man's head snapped back and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Rowan turned. Kat stood 20 feet away, rifle still raised, expression cold. You okay? I think so. Then get out of the car. It's a target now. Kat moved forward, checking the bodies with professional efficiency. Good shot on the leg, clean hit. Rowan looked at the man she'd shot. Still alive, but in agony, blood pooling beneath him, and felt her stomach turn. I didn't mean... You meant exactly enough. He was going to kill you. You stopped him. Kat grabbed her arm. No time for guilt. Move. They ran toward the warehouse. Inside was chaos. Gunfire echoed from multiple floors. Someone was screaming. Smoke filled the air, not from fire this time, but from something chemical. Tear gas, maybe. Stay close, Kat ordered, moving through the space like she had a map memorized. They found Lucien on the 2nd floor surrounded by bodies, some breathing, some not. His face was covered in blood, but his eyes were clear, focused. When he saw Rowan, relief and fury crossed his face in equal measure. I told you to stay in the car. They shot at me. So you came inside a war zone? His voice rose. What part of stay safe did you not understand? The part where staying in the car got me shot at. Rowan's voice matched his. Where's Victor? Gone. Lucien kicked one of the unconscious bodies. Bastard wasn't even here. This was a decoy. He knew we'd come, set up a skeleton crew and disappeared. Marcus appeared from a side room, limping slightly but alive. Found their communications. Victor's got a 2nd location, the docks. That's where the 3rd SUV went. Lucien swore viciously. How many people do we have left? 7, 3 injured, the rest operational. That's not enough. Then we make it enough. Rowan grabbed his arm. Victor wanted you to come here, wanted to split your forces. So we regroup, we heal, and we hit him tomorrow when he's not expecting it. He'll be expecting it. Lucien's voice was flat. That's the game. He draws me out, makes me react, picks me off piece by piece until there's nothing left. So stop reacting. Rowan pulled him close, forcing him to look at her. You've been defensive since this started, playing his game by his rules. Change the game, make him come to you. How? Give him something he can't resist, something he'll burn everything to get. Understanding dawned in Lucien's eyes. You. Me. Rowan's voice was steady, even though her hands shook. He wants to hurt you. Best way to do that is through me. So we let him think he's won, let him think he's captured me. Then when he shows up to gloat, we kill him. Lucien's expression was torn between admiration and horror. That's insane. That's the only play we have left. She grabbed his face. Unless you have a better idea. The silence stretched. Outside, sirens wailed. Police were coming. They'd have questions about the bodies, the gunfire, the small war that had just erupted in an abandoned warehouse. We need to move, Marcus said. Now. Lucien nodded once, sharp and decisive. Everyone out. Leave nothing behind. We regroup at the secondary location. He looked at Rowan. You're not bait. We'll find another way. There is no other way? I said no. His voice was absolute. I'm not dangling you in front of a monster to save myself. That's a line I won't cross. Even if it means losing everything? Even then. He pulled her toward the exit. Now move before the cops show up and we all end up explaining bodies. They fled through the back, piling into vehicles and disappearing into Chicago's industrial maze. Rowan rode in silence, her mind spinning. She'd shot someone. Actually pulled the trigger and put a bullet in another human being. The man's scream still echoed in her ears. But underneath the horror was something else. Something cold and calculating that whispered she'd do it again if she had to. That survival mattered more than morality. That in Lucien's world, her world now, violence wasn't a failure. It was a tool. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel powerful. They ended up in a safe house on the north side, a nondescript apartment that looked abandoned from the outside but was furnished inside with enough weapons and supplies to survive a siege. Lucien's people scattered to different rooms, tending wounds and checking ammunition. Nina appeared like a ghost, her eyes tracking over everyone. 3 wounded, none critical. But we can't keep this up. Victor has unlimited resources. We don't. Then we end it tomorrow, Lucien said. How? He looked at Rowan. She knew what he was thinking, knew he was still considering her plan, even though he'd rejected it in the warehouse. Knew that desperate times made people do desperate things. I'm still not bait, she said quietly. I know. But his eyes said otherwise. The night passed in tense silence. People slept in shifts. Rowan couldn't sleep at all. She sat by the window watching the street below, gun still in her pocket, her mind replaying the moment she'd shot that man, the way he'd gone down, the blood, the screaming. Lucien found her at dawn, sat beside her without speaking. His presence was solid, comforting in a way nothing else could be. You did good yesterday, he said finally. I shot someone. You survived. That's what matters. Is it? Rowan looked at him. Because I keep thinking about all the lines I said I'd never cross, all the promises I made to myself about the kind of person I'd be, and last night I crossed every single one without hesitation. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. Or that's me becoming exactly what I was afraid of. Her voice broke. What if Grant was right? What if I'm just as violent as he was? Just better at justifying it. Lucien grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. Grant hurt you because he enjoyed it, because control got him off and your pain was just a bonus. You hurt someone yesterday because they were trying to kill you. Those are not the same thing. How do you know? How do you know I won't? She couldn't finish the sentence. Because I've seen real monsters. I fought them. I've been them. His voice was raw. And you're not one. You're just a person trying to survive in a world that's doing its best to kill you. That's not evil. That's human. Rowan wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that violence in self-defense was different from violence for control. But the line felt blurry now. Unstable. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her check. The text was simple. I have something you want. Docks. Warehouse 7. 1 hour. Come alone, or he dies. Below it was a photo. Nina, tied to a chair, blood running from a cut above her eye. Rowan's blood turned to ice. Lucienne. He looked at the phone. His face went white, then red, then something beyond rage. When did they take her? I don't know. She was here an hour ago. Oh. She left to check on the staff at the hotel. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Said she'd be back by dawn. I thought... He stopped. Fuck. Lucien was already moving, grabbing weapons, calling people. His voice was cold, controlled, but Rowan could see the fear underneath. Nina had been with him for 7 years, had protected him when no one else would, had become something close to family in a life where family was fatal. This is the play, Lucien said. This is checking his gun. Victor knows Nina matters, knows I'll come for her. He's using her as bait to draw me out. So we don't go, Marcus said. We find another way. There is no other way. Lucien's voice was flat. He'll kill her if I don't show. Probably kill her anyway, but I have to try. It's a trap, Kat said. You know it's a trap. Of course it's a trap. Lucien met Rowan's eyes. Which is why I need you to stay here. All of you. I go alone. I negotiate. I get Nina out. And then Victor kills you both, Rowan said quietly. Probably. So we changed the play. She stood, her mind already working through the angles. He expects you to come charging in alone. Emotional. Desperate. So we don't do that. We do what he least expects. Which is? Rowan grabbed the phone, started typing a response. We give him exactly what he asked for. Her message was simple. I'll come. Alone. Trade me for her. Lucien grabbed her wrist before she could send it. Absolutely not. It's the only way. I don't care. Nina is dying because of me. The words exploded out of her. Victor took her to get to you, to get to me. So I end it. I go in. I trade myself. You get Nina out. And then, whoop. Then I lose you both. Lucien's voice cracked. That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's a chance. Rowan grabbed his face, making him look at her. Victor wants to hurt you, wants to see you broken. He won't kill me right away. He'll gloat first, explain how smart he is, give you time to move into position. And when he does, we take him out. Marcus's voice was thoughtful. It could work if we position people around the warehouse before she goes in, if we're ready to move the second we have a shot. It won't work, Lucien said. Victor's not an idiot. He'll have his own people positioned. It'll be a bloodbath. Then it's a bloodbath. Rowan's voice was steady. But it's our bloodbath, on our terms, and Nina lives. The silence stretched between them. Rowan could see Lucien calculating, weighing lives against odds, trying to find a scenario where everyone survived. Finally, he said, if we do this, if I let you walk into that warehouse, you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. You go in, you make the trade, you get out. Understand? Understood. And if anything goes wrong, if Victor even looks at you wrong, you drop to the floor. Marcus will have a shot. He won't miss. Rowan nodded, her heart hammering. Lucien pulled her close, holding her like he was trying to memorize the shape of her body. I love you, he said quietly. I should have said it before. Should have said it 100 times. But I love you. And if you die in that warehouse, I won't. But if you do, his voice broke. If you do, I'm burning this city to the ground. Every person who helped Victor, every person who looked the other way. I'll destroy everything until there's nothing left but ash and memory. That's a promise. Rowan kissed him hard, tasting fear and desperation and love all mixed together. Then I better not die. They had 45 minutes. Marcus positioned his people around the warehouse, snipers on rooftops, spotters in windows, a perimeter that would collapse the second Rowan gave the signal. Kat gave her a wire, small, nearly invisible, tucked under her shirt. Lucien gave her one more gun, smaller than the first, easier to hide. Ankle holster, he said, strapping it on. Last resort. You only use it if everything else fails. Got it. He stood, his hands lingering on her leg. I can't believe I'm letting you do this. You're not letting me. I'm choosing to. She grabbed his hand. This ends tonight, one way or another. We end it. They drove to the docks in silence. The warehouse district was abandoned at dawn, just empty buildings and broken pavement and the smell of water. Marcus parked 2 blocks away, checked his rifle, met Rowan's eyes in the rearview mirror. You've got 5 minutes before we're in position. After that, anytime you're ready. Rowan nodded, climbed out, started walking. The warehouse looked like every other building on the block. Rusted metal, broken windows, graffiti covering every surface. But as she got closer, she saw the differences. New locks on the doors, fresh tire tracks in the dirt, security cameras hidden in the shadows. Victor was here, waiting. Rowan checked the wire one more time, touched the gun at her ankle for reassurance. Then she walked through the front door like she owned the place. The interior was massive, high ceilings, concrete floors, shadows everywhere. In the center, lit by a single hanging bulb, Nina sat tied to a chair. She looked bad, face bruised, blood dried on her temple, but her eyes were alert, angry. Run, Nina said hoarsely. It's a trap. I know. Rowan walked closer. That's why I came. Men emerged from the shadows. 5 of them, 6, all armed, all watching her with the kind of casual cruelty that came from years of hurting people for money. And in the center, stepping into the light like he'd been waiting for an audience, was Victor Cade. He was smaller than Rowan expected, mid-50s, going gray, with the kind of face that looked ordinary until you saw his eyes. They were dead, completely empty of anything human. Rebecca Chen, he said, and his voice was smooth, educated. Or should I call you Rowan Vale? I've heard so much about you. The girl who tamed Lucien Vare made him soft, made him vulnerable. He smiled, made him weak. Let Nina go. Rowan's voice was steady. That's the deal, me for her. The deal. Victor laughed. You think you're in a position to make deals? You walked into my warehouse, my territory, my trap. You don't get to negotiate. Then why am I still alive? Because killing you quickly would be boring. He moved closer, circling her like prey. I want Lucien to watch you die. Want him to see what happens when he tries to play hero. Want him to understand that everything he loves turns to ash. He's not coming. The lie came easily. I came alone, like you asked. Please. Victor's smile widened. You think I don't know he's got snipers on the roofs? People in every building with a sight line? That wire you're wearing is adorable, by the way. Very network television. He gestured to one of his men. Take it off her. Rough hands grabbed Rowan's shirt, ripping it open. The wire fell to the floor. Victor crushed it under his heel. Now, he said quietly, let's talk about what happens next. He pulled a gun, sleek, expensive, well-maintained, pointed it at Nina's head. Lucien has 30 seconds to walk through that door, or I decorate the walls with her brain. Your choice. Rowan's heart stopped. He's not 20 seconds. He doesn't even know. 10. The door burst open. Lucien walked in with his hands raised, gun visible on his hip, but not drawn. His face was a mask of controlled rage. Behind him, Marcus and 2 others followed, all armed, all looking like they were barely restraining themselves from opening fire. Here I am, Lucien said quietly. Let them go. Victor's smile was triumphant. The great Lucien Vare, brought to his knees by a woman. How predictable. He gestured with the gun. On your knees. All of you. Hands behind your heads. They knelt. Rowan watched Lucien's face, looking for a sign, a signal, anything that would tell her what to do. But his expression was blank. Waiting. 7 years, Victor said, starting to pace. 7 years you've been systematically destroying everything I built, taking my territory, my business, my respect. And for what? Because of some dead girl who couldn't keep her mouth shut? Lucien's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. She was nothing, Victor continued. Your sister. Just another junkie whore who thought she could run from her debts. But you turned her death into a crusade, made me into a villain, hunted my people like animals. He stopped in front of Lucien, pressing the gun to his forehead. Well, now you get to watch everyone you love die. Starting with... The gunshot was deafening, but it wasn't Victor who fired. Rowan had moved without thinking, dropped, rolled, grabbed the ankle gun, and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet caught Victor in the shoulder, spinning him around. Chaos erupted. Lucian surged to his feet, grabbing Victor's gun. Marcus and his people opened fire. Victor's men fired back. The warehouse became a war zone of muzzle flashes and screaming and bodies dropping. Rowan crawled toward Nina, bullets whipping past her head, grabbed the knife from one of the fallen men, and started cutting the ropes. Nina's hands came free. "Can you run?" Rowan shouted over the gunfire. "Try and stop me!" They ran toward the back exit, Nina stumbling but moving. Behind them, Lucian fought like something inhuman, all brutal efficiency and controlled violence. One of Victor's men went down, then another, but there were too many. Even with Marcus's people, they were outnumbered. A bullet caught Marcus in the chest. He went down hard. Kat took a hit to the leg, screaming. Lucien was bleeding from somewhere but still fighting, still moving, his face a mask of focus and rage. And Victor, wounded but alive, was raising his gun, aiming at Lucien's back. Rowan didn't think, just acted. She raised her gun and fired, once, twice, 3 times. The first bullet missed, the second caught Victor in the ribs. The third hit him square in the chest. He looked shocked, like he couldn't believe a nobody, a girl who'd been running scared 3 months ago, had just killed him. Then he fell. The gunfire stopped. Victor's remaining men saw their boss go down and made the smart choice. They ran, disappeared into the shadows, leaving their dead behind. Lucien stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, covered in blood. His eyes found Rowan's across the space. "You killed him," he said quietly. "I did." Rowan's voice was steady, even though her hands shook violently. "He was going to shoot you, so I did." Rowan's voice was steady, even though her hands shook violently. "He was going to shoot you, so I shot him first." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with finality. Victor Cade lay on the concrete floor, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes staring at nothing. The man who'd started this war was dead, and Rowan had pulled the trigger. Lucien crossed the space between them in 3 strides, pulled her against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering, could smell blood and gunpowder and sweat. His hands trembled as they held her. "You're alive," he said into her hair. "You're alive!" "So are you." Rowan pulled back just enough to see his face. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing that matters." He cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. "You killed for me." The statement wasn't a question, wasn't an accusation, just a fact that needed acknowledgement. "I killed to survive," Rowan said quietly. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She thought about that, about the moment she'd raised the gun and aimed at another human being. There had been no hesitation, no moral crisis, just cold calculation and the absolute certainty that if she didn't fire, Lucien would die. "I don't know," she admitted. "Ask me again in a year when I've had time to process what I just did." Nina appeared beside them, limping but alive. Her face was a mess, but her eyes were clear. "We need to move. Police will be here any minute. This many bodies, this much gunfire. Someone called it in." Lucien nodded, shifting into command mode. "Marcus?" "Alive. Vested." Marcus struggled to his feet, clutching his chest but breathing. "Hurts like hell, but nothing vital." "Kat?" "Leg wound. I can walk." Kat was already wrapping her thigh with strips torn from someone's shirt. "But I'm going to need actual medical attention soon." "Everyone who can move, move now. Dead and wounded, stay. We were never here." Lucien grabbed Rowan's hand. "That includes you. No statements to police, no heroic confessions. We disappear." They fled through this back exit as sirens wailed in the distance. 3 vehicles waited in the alley. Lucien's people had planned for every contingency. They split up, taking different routes, abandoning the warehouse and the bodies and Victor Cade's blank stare. Rowan rode in silence, her mind numb. She'd killed someone. Not in abstract self-defense like shooting at legs in panic. She'd aimed at a man's chest and fired until he stopped moving. Premeditated, calculated, effective. The realization should have destroyed her. Instead, she just felt tired. They ended up at a different safe house. This one outside the city, in a neighborhood where money bought silence and questions weren't asked. A doctor was already there, someone used to treating gunshot wounds without filing reports. He worked on Kat first, then Marcus, then the others. When he got to Lucien, Rowan saw the damage. A bullet had grazed his side, deep enough to need stitches, but not life-threatening. Bruises covered his ribs. His knuckles were raw from impact. He looked like he'd gone 10 rounds with death and barely won. "You should rest," the doctor said, cleaning the wound. "I'm fine. You're running on adrenaline. When it wears off, you'll collapse." The doctor began stitching with practiced efficiency. 24 hours of actual rest. That's medical advice, not a suggestion. Lucien nodded, but his eyes were on Rowan. She sat across the room, gun still in her pocket, Victor's blood on her shirt. She hadn't moved in over an hour, hadn't spoken except to confirm she wasn't injured. When the doctor finished and moved on to check the others, Lucien crossed to her, sat down carefully, wincing at the pull of fresh stitches. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "What's there to say?" Rowan's voice was flat. "I killed a man. Watched him die. Feel absolutely nothing about it. That's probably a sign of something deeply wrong with me. Or a sign you're in shock. Maybe." She finally looked at him. "But I don't think so. I think I just don't care that he's dead. He tried to kill you, kill Nina, kill all of us. And now he's gone and the world is better for it. That should bother me more than it does." Lucien reached for her hand. She let him take it. "When I killed my first person, I threw up for an hour afterward. Couldn't eat for 3 days. Had nightmares for months. But the second one was easier, the third easier still. By the 10th, I'd stopped counting, stopped caring. That's what violence does. It wears down the parts of you that feel horror until all that's left is the part that survives. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest." He squeezed her hand. "You're not broken. You're adapting. And yeah, that adaptation might change who you are. But that doesn't make you a monster. It makes you someone who refuses to die quietly." Rowan wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that pulling the trigger hadn't fundamentally altered something in her soul. But sitting there with Victor's death on her conscience and Lucien's blood on her hands, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now? We wait for the fallout. Police will investigate. Victor's people will either scatter or come looking for revenge. And we figure out how to rebuild from the ashes." Lucien's voice was tired. "But first we survive the next 24 hours. Then the next. Then the next. That's how you do this. One day at a time." The news broke within hours. Mysterious fire at exclusive nightclub. Gang violence at Southside Warehouse. Multiple deaths at the docks, including notorious criminal Victor Cade. The media spun it as gang warfare, rival factions settling old scores. Lucien's name never appeared in any report. That's what money and connections bought. The ability to disappear from narratives, to become invisible while bodies piled up and questions went unanswered. Rowan watched the coverage from the safe house, her stomach churning. People were dead. Buildings burned. Lives destroyed. And the official story was just gang violence, as if that explained everything. As if violence in certain neighborhoods was expected, acceptable, beneath investigation. "Don't think about it," Nina said, appearing with coffee. Her face was bandaged, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "You'll drive yourself crazy trying to make sense of systems designed not to make sense." "How do you do it?" Rowan asked. "Live in this world, see this much death, not lose yourself completely." Nina sat down with a wince. "I lost myself years ago. What you're looking at is the person I rebuilt from the wreckage. She's harder than who I used to be, colder. But she's alive. And in Lucien's world, alive counts as winning. Is it worth it? The cost?" "That's not a question anyone can answer except you." Nina sipped her coffee, studying Rowan over the rim. "But I'll tell you this. I've worked for Lucien for 7 years, watched him destroy himself trying to save people who didn't even know they needed saving. Watched him push away anyone who got close because he was convinced they'd end up dead. Then you walked into Obsidian looking like a ghost, and he saw something worth protecting, worth risking himself for, worth trying to be better for." She set down the cup. "So yeah, for me, watching him remember how to be human again, Watching you both survive what should have killed you, that's worth every scar I've collected along the way. Rowan's throat tightened. I don't know if I make him better. I just make him more desperate. Same thing sometimes. Desperation makes you fight harder, care more, take risks you wouldn't take if you had nothing to lose. Nina stood, her movements stiff from injuries. He loves you, real love, the kind that burns everything down and builds it back different. You can run from that if you want, but I think you'll regret it. She left before Rowan could respond. The first week passed in a fog. Police came asking questions, routine investigations into the warehouse incident. Lucien had lawyers, good ones, who made sure no one could connect him to any crime. Security footage mysteriously corrupted. Witnesses suddenly remembering nothing. Financial records showing he'd been in meetings across town during every relevant time period. The system bent around him like he was gravity. Rowan watched it happen with growing unease. This was the real power. Not guns or violence, but the ability to reshape reality itself. To make inconvenient truths disappear. To walk away from massacre after massacre without consequence. Does it ever bother you? She asked one night, finding Lucien in the safe house kitchen at 3 a.m. He couldn't sleep either, his face drawn with exhaustion and old pain. Does what bother me? Getting away with it. All of it. Victor, Grant, every person you've... She stopped, the words catching. How do you live with yourself? Lucien set down the water glass he'd been holding, turned to face her fully. I don't. Not really. Most nights I lie awake cataloging every person I've hurt, every choice I've made that led to someone's death. Every time I crossed a line, I swore I'd never cross. His voice was raw. But then morning comes and I get up and I do it again. Because the alternative, letting people like Victor operate without opposition, feels worse than the guilt. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He moved closer, and in the dim kitchen light she could see every scar, every shadow. You want me to say I'm tortured by conscience? I am. You want me to say I wish I could stop? I do, but wishing doesn't change what needs doing. Someone has to fight in the dark. Might as well be someone who's already damned. You're not damned. Yes, I am. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I accepted that years ago, made peace with it. But you still have a chance to walk away clean, to be someone who survived violence without becoming violent. So if that's what you want, go. I meant what I said. You're free to leave. Rowan looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the weight he carried trying to protect a city that would never thank him, the loneliness of fighting battles no one else could see. What if I don't want to leave? The words came out quiet but certain. What if I want to stay and fight beside you? Not because I'm trapped or scared or don't have options, but because I choose this. Choose you. Choose us. Lucien's expression cracked. You don't know what you're saying. I killed a man, Lucien. Watched him die. Made a conscious choice to end his life to save yours. She grabbed his hands, holding tight. I'm not walking away clean. That ship sailed the moment I pulled the trigger. So stop trying to protect me from choices I've already made. I'm in this. All the way. For better or worse. It'll be worse. His voice broke. It's always worse. Then we'll survive worse together. She pulled him close, feeling his heart hammer against hers. I'm not your sister. I'm not a ghost you need to save. I'm a grown woman who's choosing to love a complicated, dangerous, deeply broken man because he's the only person who sees me clearly and doesn't look away. So stop giving me exits and start trusting me to stay. The kiss that followed tasted like desperation and relief mixed together. Lucien held her like she was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control, and Rowan held back just as fiercely. They stood in the dark kitchen while Chicago slept and made promises neither could guarantee they'd keep, but they'd try. That's all anyone could do. The second week brought news that Victor's organization had collapsed without him. His people scattered, arrested, or absorbed by other operations. The trafficking routes he'd controlled shut down. The girls he'd exploited got connected with services that might actually help them. It wasn't a clean ending. Some escaped justice. Others fell through cracks in systems too broken to catch them. But it was better than before. Less suffering, fewer victims. Lucien called it a win. Rowan called it complicated. They started rebuilding. Not obsidian, that building was ash and insurance claims. But something new, something different. Lucien had money, connections, and a reputation for running clean operations in dirty industries. He used all three to build something that looked legitimate from the outside, but still operated in shadows when necessary. A consulting firm, officially. Security, risk assessment, problem solving for clients who preferred discretion. Unofficially, it was a way to keep fighting the same battles he'd always fought, just with better cover. Rowan became his partner in more than just relationship. She had skills he didn't, the ability to blend in, to seem harmless, to ask questions that didn't raise suspicion. She'd spent 3 months being invisible. Now she weaponized that invisibility. They worked investigations together, tracked trafficking networks, identified corrupt officials, built cases that would hold up in court when possible, and handled things more directly when courts failed. It wasn't legal, wasn't safe, wasn't anything close to the quiet life Rowan once imagined she'd want. But it was hers, chosen, owned. 3 months after the fire, they stood on a rooftop overlooking the lot where Obsidian used to be. The building was being demolished, too damaged to repair, too expensive to restore. Soon it would be empty ground, a memory. "You regret it?" Rowan asked. "Losing the club?" "Yes and no." Lucien's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close against the wind. "I built Obsidian to have a front, a way to operate without drawing attention. But it became something more, a place people felt safe, a sanctuary in a city full of predators." He paused. "But it was also a lie. Beautiful on the surface, violence underneath. Maybe it's better this way. Start over with something honest. Is anything we do honest? What we feel is honest." He turned her to face him, gray eyes serious. "Everything else is compromise and calculation. But this, us, that's the only real thing I've got." Rowan reached up and touched his face. 3 months had softened some of his edges. The constant tension that used to live in his shoulders had eased. He smiled more, laughed occasionally. Still carried guns and made hard choices, but he did it with her beside him instead of alone in the dark. "I love you," she said. Not the first time she'd said it, but it still felt new, still felt like a revelation. "I love you too," he kissed her softly. "Even though loving me might be the most dangerous thing you've ever done." "I've survived worse." She grinned. "Besides, dangerous is kind of my type now." They stood there watching the sun set over Chicago, while below them the demolition crews worked and the city continued its endless noise. Somewhere in this sprawl, people were suffering, being hurt, trapped in situations they couldn't escape. And somewhere else, Rowan and Lucien were planning how to find them, how to help, how to fight battles most people would never know happened. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, wasn't happily ever after, but it was something rarer. Two broken people who'd found each other in the dark and decided that surviving together was worth whatever came next. The 4th month brought Grant's mother to Chicago. She showed up at the consulting firm's office unannounced, her eyes red from crying, clutching a folder of documents. Rowan's stomach dropped when the receptionist announced her. She almost ran, almost called security, but something made her agree to the meeting. Mrs. Mercer looked older than Rowan remembered, fragile. She sat in the conference room with trembling hands and wouldn't make eye contact. "I know what he did to you," she said finally. "The hospital visits, the bruises. I knew, and I didn't stop him because he was my son, and I kept thinking he'd get better. That the real Grant, the sweet boy I raised, would come back." Her voice broke. "He didn't. He just got worse, and now he's dead, and I'm left wondering if I could have stopped it. If I'd just—" "You couldn't have stopped him." Rowan's voice was gentle, despite the ice in her chest. "I tried. For 2 years I tried. He didn't want to change. He wanted to control. And people like that don't get better until they hit rock bottom or die. Grant chose die. The police said it was an accident. It was." The lie came easily now. Rowan had practiced it, believed it almost. "He was drinking, drove too fast, lost control. It's tragic, but it's not mysterious." Mrs. Mercer finally looked up, and her eyes were knowing, seeing. "You ran from him, disappeared completely, and 3 months later he's dead in a car accident." She pushed the folder across the table. "I'm not stupid. I know what my son was, what he was capable of, and I know that you have every reason to want him dead." Rowan's heart hammered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't blame you." Mrs. Mercer stood, her movements heavy with grief. I don't blame whoever helped you. I don't blame anyone except myself for raising a monster. I just wanted you to know that. Wanted you to hear from his mother that you deserved better, deserved safety, deserved a life without fear. She moved toward the door, then paused. The folder has everything. His medical records showing the anger issues I ignored. His ex-girlfriend's restraining orders I paid to disappear. Police reports I convinced officers not to file. I've given copies to the district attorney. Whatever he's investigating, he'll have the full truth now. She left before Rowan could respond. The folder sat on the conference table like an accusation. Rowan opened it with shaking hands and found exactly what Mrs. Mercer described. Years of documented violence. A pattern of abuse that should have put Grant in prison long before he ever met Rebecca Chen. She thought about the woman she used to be. The one who'd stayed because she'd believed leaving was worse. The one who'd covered bruises with makeup and made excuses to friends who stopped calling. The one who'd planned her escape in stolen moments and prayer that he wouldn't kill her first. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder. Someone who'd killed and survived and learned to live with ghosts. Rowan closed the folder, added it to the file they were building on systematic failures in the justice system. Mrs. Mercer's testimony would help other women, might prevent other Grants from slipping through cracks. It wouldn't bring Grant back, wouldn't undo his death, but it gave his ending meaning beyond violence. That night she told Lucien about the meeting. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Do you think she knew? Rowan asked. Really knew what you did? Probably. Lucian's voice was quiet. Mothers know, they just don't always admit it out loud. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with a lot of things I shouldn't be okay with. He pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. But yeah, Grant's mother can find peace in believing justice was served one way or another. I'm not going to rob her of that. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from months of learning each other's rhythms. Outside, the city glittered with a million stories, some tragic, some hopeful, most somewhere in between. Do you think we're good people? Rowan asked suddenly. Lucian considered that. I think we're people who do bad things for reasons we've convinced ourselves are good. Whether that makes us good or bad. He shrugged. Ask me in 10 years. Maybe we'll have an answer by then. And if we don't? Then we keep doing what we're doing and hope the balance tips more toward helping than hurting. He kissed the top of her head. It's not a perfect system, but it's ours. The 6th month brought a breakthrough in one of their cases. A trafficking ring operating out of 3 cities, moving women and children through legitimate business fronts. Rowan had spent weeks building the evidence, following money trails, connecting dots that looked random until you knew what to look for. They handed everything to FBI contacts who owed Lucian favors, watched from a distance as raids went down, arrests were made, victims were freed, 23 people rescued, 15 arrested, 1 network destroyed. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, Rowan just felt tired. How many more? She asked that night, lying in bed, unable to sleep. How many more networks? How many more victims? How many more fights before it actually gets better? I don't know. Lucian's voice in the dark was honest. Maybe never. Maybe this is Sisyphean, rolling the same boulder up the same hill forever, watching it roll back down, starting over. That's depressing. That's reality. He rolled over to face her, his features barely visible. But here's the thing. Every network we dismantle is people who don't suffer. Every arrest is potential victims who never become actual victims. We're not changing the world. We're just making it slightly less awful for a handful of people who got lucky enough to be on our radar. And yeah, that's exhausting and frustrating and feels like pissing into an ocean of horror. But it's also 23 people who get to go home, to heal, to live. That has to count for something. Rowan thought about that, about the women they'd helped, the children who'd been returned to families, the futures that hadn't been stolen. It counts for everything, she said quietly. Then we keep doing it, one case at a time, one saved life at a time, until we can't do it anymore. The 9th month brought the anniversary of the night Rowan first walked into Obsidian. They marked it quietly. Dinner at a restaurant neither could have afforded a year ago, wine neither of them drank much of, conversation that wandered through memory. You were terrified, Lucian said, smiling at the memory. Soaking wet, trying so hard to seem confident when I could see you calculating escape routes. You were terrifying. Rowan kicked him under the table. All cold eyes and quiet threats. I thought you were going to kill me. I thought about it. His smile widened at her expression. Kidding, mostly. You were a complication I didn't need, some runner with a fake ID and obvious trauma looking for exactly the kind of trouble I specialized in. Smart move would have been turning you away. Why didn't you? His expression sobered. Because you reminded me why I started all this. The look in your eyes, terror and determination mixed together. I saw my sister in that look. Saw every person who'd ever been hurt and decided to survive anyway. And I thought if I could keep you safe, maybe it would balance some cosmic scale. Maybe it would count for something. Did it? You're here, alive, choosing to stay. So yeah. He reached across the table, taking her hand. It counted for everything. After dinner, they walked through the neighborhood where Obsidian used to stand. The lot was still empty, waiting for new development. Plans existed for a mixed-use building, retail below, apartments above, a memorial garden remembering the club that once stood here. Lucien had purchased the lot, hired architects, made sure the design included space dedicated to victims of violence, a quiet courtyard where people could come to reflect, to heal, to remember. It was his way of turning loss into something meaningful. Will you miss it? Rowan asked, looking at the empty space. The club, the life you had before. I miss the simplicity sometimes. The clear lines between legal and illegal, right and wrong. But I don't miss being alone. Don't miss carrying everything by myself. He pulled her close. You made messy worthwhile. That might be the least romantic thing you've ever said. But it's honest. He kissed her, slow and thorough. You want romantic? I can tell you you're beautiful. That you changed my life. That I can't imagine surviving without you. All of which is true. But what matters more is that you made me want to survive. To build something instead of just destroying. To believe that maybe we could be more than our worst choices. Rowan's throat tightened. You make it sound like I saved you. You did. Just not the way fairy tales work. You didn't fix me. Didn't make me less broken. You just made being broken feel less lonely. His hand cupped her face. That's worth more than saving. They stood there while the city moved around them. Cars passing, people laughing. Life continuing its endless forward march. Somewhere in Chicago, someone was suffering. Somewhere else, someone was healing. And in this small space, two people who'd survived their own wars held each other and chose to believe tomorrow would be survivable too. The year mark came with a surprise. Lucien presented her with a key, actual metal, old-fashioned, hanging from a simple chain. What's this? Rowan turned it over in her hands. The penthouse. I'm signing it over to you, legally. It's yours regardless of what happens to us. He rushed on before she could protest. I'm not trying to trap you, not trying to make you feel obligated, but I want you to have a place that's undeniably yours, where you're safe no matter what, where if I cross a line or you need distance or we implode spectacularly, you have somewhere that's only yours. Rowan looked at the key, then at him. You're giving me an escape route. I'm giving you a choice. His voice was quiet. Every day. You can stay or go, and either way you have a home. That's what I'm offering. Freedom to choose. Because that's the only thing worth anything. She set the key on the table between them. For a moment, Lucien's face fell, thinking she was rejecting it. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a different key. Newer. Shinier. I bought a place. They're 3 blocks from here. Smaller than the penthouse. Less expensive, but it's mine. Bought with money I earned in my own name, with no one's permission. She set it next to his key. And I'm giving you a copy because I want you to have somewhere that's ours. Not yours you're sharing, not mine you're visiting. Ours, equal, shared, built together. Lucien stared at the 2 keys lying side by side. Then he started laughing, the kind that came from deep in the chest and couldn't be contained. We're both idiots. Complete idiots. Rowan was laughing too. Trying to give each other safety by offering separate spaces when what we actually want is to build something together. So what do we do? She picked up both keys. We keep both places. Yours for when I need air, mine for when you need quiet. And we build a third option somewhere in between. That's wildly impractical. That's us. She leaned across the table and kissed him. Impractical, messy, somehow still alive. I wouldn't trade it. Neither would I. The conversation turned to logistics then, where this hypothetical third space might be, what it would look like, how they'd split time between locations. But underneath the practical talk was something deeper, an acknowledgement that they were building a life. Not just surviving day to day, but actually planning for a future that extended beyond the next threat. It felt like hope, fragile and new, but real. 14 months after the night Rowan walked into Obsidian, she stood in the courtyard of the new building that had risen from the club's ashes. The memorial garden was complete, stone benches, careful landscaping, a fountain with water that caught light and threw it back as rainbows. And on the wall, a plaque, simple, direct. For those who survived, for those who didn't, for the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Nina stood beside her, using a cane now. Her leg had healed but left her with a permanent limp. It's good, she said quietly. Would have liked it to mention the club specifically, but I understand why you went broader. Obsidian was special, but it wasn't the only thing that mattered. Rowan touched the plaque. This is for everyone who's fought to survive, who's rebuilt from ashes, who's chosen to keep going when stopping would have been easier. Like you, like all of us. She turned to Nina. How are you doing, really? Nina considered the question. I'm alive. Some days that's enough. Some days I want more. But I'm learning to sit with the uncertainty, to not need every question answered. She gestured around the courtyard. This helps. Knowing something good came from all that destruction. That we didn't just survive, we built something that matters. They sat on one of the benches while people moved through the space. Some stopped to read the plaque. Others just enjoyed the quiet. None of them knew the true story of what had happened here, and that was okay. The memorial wasn't for them to know. It was for everyone who carried survival in their bones. Lucien appeared from the building's entrance. He'd been in a meeting with the tenant association. The building included affordable housing units that he'd insisted be part of the development, profit mixed with purpose. That was their compromise. He sat down next to Rowan, taking her hand automatically. They approved the community center proposal, second floor, programs for domestic violence survivors, job training, legal aid, everything we pitched. That's good. Rowan leaned against his shoulder. Your sister would be proud. Our sister, he corrected gently. Your family now. That makes her yours too. The word settled something in Rowan's chest. Family. She hadn't had that in years, had cut herself off from everyone when she ran from Grant. But here, in this strange found family of criminals and survivors, she'd built something that felt like belonging. What do you think she'd say? Rowan asked. About all this. About us. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. I think she'd say we're idiots for doing it the hard way. That we could have just run away together and been happy somewhere quiet. But I also think she'd understand why we can't. Why fighting matters. Why helping others survive is the only way we know how to honor the people who didn't. That's a lot of weight to carry. It's lighter when you're not carrying it alone. They sat in the courtyard while Chicago moved around them. Two people who'd found each other in the dark and chosen to build something in the light. It wasn't perfect, wasn't safe, wasn't anything close to the lives they'd imagined for themselves. But it was theirs. Chosen. Earned. Built from the wreckage of who they'd been into something new. The story could have ended there. Clean, hopeful. Two survivors finding peace. But life wasn't stories. Life kept going, kept throwing complications, kept demanding choices. 6 months later, Rowan missed her period. She stared at the pregnancy test in the bathroom of their shared apartment, her hands shaking, her mind spinning through implications she couldn't fully process. A baby. A life. Something innocent and vulnerable in a world that was neither. She hadn't told Lucien about her suspicions. Hadn't wanted to worry him until she knew for sure. Now she knew, and the weight of that knowledge felt crushing. What kind of life could they offer a child? What kind of mother could she be when she carried guns and helped dismantle trafficking networks? What kind of father would Lucien be when his past was full of violence and his present wasn't much better? She heard him come home, heard him moving through the apartment, calling her name. Rowan looked at herself in the mirror. She was different from the woman who'd walked into Obsidian 18 months ago. Harder, scarred, but also more whole. More herself than she'd been when survival was her only goal. She could do this. They could do this. Not perfectly, not safely, but together. She walked out of the bathroom with the test in her hand. Lucian took one look at her face and knew. Are you pregnant? Yes. The silence stretched between them. She watched emotions flicker across his face. Shock, fear, something that might have been joy. That's... He stopped. Started over. How do you feel? Terrified. Overwhelmed. Completely unprepared. She moved closer. But also maybe a little bit hopeful. If we can survive everything we've survived, if we can build something good from all the violence, maybe we can do this too. Lucien closed the distance and pulled her into his arms. She felt him shaking slightly. A baby. We're going to have a baby. If I keep it, if we decide that's what we want... She pulled back to look at him. I need to know you're in this, really in this, not just going along because you think it's what I want. I'm terrified, he admitted. I don't know how to be a father. Don't know if I can protect a child in this world. Don't know if we should bring someone innocent into lives as messy as ours. He cupped her face. But I'm also more sure of this than I've been of anything. If you want this, if you want to try, then I'm all in. We'll figure it out together. Together, Rowan echoed. They stood there in their shared apartment holding each other while the city hummed outside, and a future neither had planned suddenly felt possible. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was exactly like everything else they'd built. Imperfect, complicated, and somehow worth fighting for. The next 9 months rewrote their lives again. Rowan stepped back from fieldwork, focusing on research and coordination. Lucien doubled security, expanded their network of safe contacts, and built contingencies for contingencies. They moved into a house outside the city, still close enough to work, but far enough for safety. 3 bedrooms, a yard, neighbors who asked no questions and offered friendly waves. It looked suburban and normal from the outside, which was exactly the point. Inside, they built a life, painted the nursery together, gender-neutral yellows and greens because they'd decided not to find out the sex ahead of time. Assembled furniture, argued about names, attended birthing classes where they were by far the most heavily armed couple in the room. Nina threw them a shower. Kat helped install a security system that would make the Secret Service jealous. Marcus built a safe room in the basement, just in case. Everyone they'd fought beside became aunts and uncles, building a protection network around this tiny life that hadn't even been born yet. And through it all, Rowan and Lucien learned to be partners not just in survival, but in hope. The baby came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Labor started at dawn, and by noon, Rowan was holding a daughter, small, loud, absolutely perfect. They named her Elena, after Lucien's sister, after survival and second chances and the belief that maybe this time the story could end differently. Elena Weyer came into the world surrounded by people who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and chosen to keep fighting anyway. She had a mother who'd survived abuse and rebuilt herself, a father who'd turned grief into purpose, and an extended family of survivors who'd do anything to protect her. It wasn't a normal life, but it was theirs. 5 years later, Rowan sat in their backyard watching Elena play in the grass with Marcus's dog, an old retired police K9 who'd become her favorite companion. The girl was fearless in the way children are, seeing adventure in everything, asking questions about questions. Lucien appeared beside her, handing her coffee. His hair was starting to gray at the temples. New scars joined old ones, but his eyes were lighter than they'd been 6 years ago, less haunted. She asked me today what we do for work, he said, sitting down. What did you tell her? That we help people who can't help themselves. That sometimes the world is complicated and scary, and people need others to fight for them. That it's dangerous but important, and someday she'll understand better. He sipped his coffee. Think that was okay? I think it was honest. Rowan watched Elena tackle the dog, both of them rolling in grass. We'll have to tell her the truth eventually, about Grant, about Victor, about everything we've done. And if she hates us for it, then we'll deal with that when it comes. But I think... She paused, choosing words carefully. I think she'll understand. Not right away, maybe not for years, but eventually she'll see that we did the best we could with what we had, that we chose to fight instead of run, that we built something good even when starting materials were violence and fear. That's optimistic. That's hope? She leaned against him. You taught me that. That hope isn't naive. It's the hardest thing we can choose. To keep going, keep building, keep believing tomorrow might be better than today. They sat there watching their daughter play while the sun climbed higher and Chicago hummed in the distance. The city that had nearly destroyed them. The city they'd fought to make safer. The city their daughter would inherit. It wasn't perfect, wasn't safe, would never be fully free of the darkness that lived in human hearts. But it was better than it had been. And that had to be enough. Elena looked up from her play, saw them watching, and ran over with grass in her hair and joy on her face. Mommy, Daddy, watch this! She proceeded to demonstrate a cartwheel that was more enthusiasm than technique. They clapped anyway, applauding effort over execution, celebrating the kind of fearless innocence they'd both lost too young. Again, Elena demanded, already lining up for another attempt. Again, Rowan agreed, smiling. And as she watched her daughter spin through another imperfect cartwheel, Rowan realized something fundamental had shifted. She'd spent so long running from her past, trying to escape who she'd been, that she'd forgotten the most important part. You don't escape the past. You integrate it. You take the hard lessons, the survival skills, the scars that prove you didn't give up. You take all of it and you build something new, something that honors where you've been while reaching toward where you want to go. She wasn't Rebecca Chen anymore. The girl who'd stayed too long, loved too poorly, nearly died for it. She wasn't quite Rowan Vale either. The ghost who'd hidden in Chicago's shadows, hoping no one would notice. She was something new, something whole, a woman who'd survived violence and learned to wield it carefully, who'd found love in the darkest places and built a life worth protecting, who'd chosen, again and again, in 1,000 small moments, to keep going when stopping would have been easier. That night, after Elena was asleep and the house was quiet, Rowan stood at the window looking out at the city. Lucien appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How far we've come, how far we still have to go." She leaned back against him. Whether we made the right choices. Whether our daughter will forgive us for the lives we've lived. Those are big questions for a Tuesday night. They're the only questions that matter. She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you have regrets? Looking back at everything we've done, everything we've become, do you wish we'd chosen differently?" Lucien considered that with the seriousness he gave all her questions. "I regret the people who got hurt, the collateral damage, the times I made choices out of anger instead of strategy." He paused. "But do I regret us? This life we've built? Our daughter sleeping safely upstairs? No, not for a second. Because even with all the mess and violence and moral compromise, we're happy, we're alive, we're together. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." "Me too." Rowan kissed him softly. "I love you. Even though loving you is complicated and dangerous and probably says terrible things about my judgment. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and reckless and make me want to lock you in a tower for safety. You'd never do that." "No." His smile was warm. "I'd never do that, because then you wouldn't be you. And you, exactly as you are the only thing I've ever wanted to keep." They stood there in the quiet house, two people who'd survived everything that should have killed them, holding each other while their daughter slept and the city breathed and tomorrow waited with all its complications and possibilities. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, wasn't happily ever after in the traditional sense. But it was real. It was theirs. It was built from ashes and survival, and the stubborn refusal to let trauma write their entire story. And in the end, that was the only happy ending that mattered. Not the absence of darkness, but the choice to keep finding light anyway. Rowan and Lucien had found each other in the dark. They'd built a life in the light. And whatever came next, whatever threats emerged, whatever challenges they'd face, they'd handle it together. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time, until all those moments added up to something called home.